All right, thank you, and thank you for your patience and apologies for the late start. So, good evening and welcome to this extraordinary meeting of the Planning Committee, and welcome to those watching online. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices via the stairs, either through the security door to the right of myself or opposite the lifts in the foyer. Please do not use the lifts. Please assemble in Hawley Square on the green, and officers will assist you and advise when it is deemed safe to return to the chamber. Does anyone intend to film the meeting? No. I would advise that speakers using the microphones are picked up by the cameras recording the meeting, so members of the public in the public gallery behind the speakers may be picked up by those cameras and have their image captured. Any member of the public who objects to the possibility of being filmed may wish to take this opportunity to move or leave the meeting. Would everyone present, please ensure their mobile phones are turned to silent and that they are not used to make or receive phone calls or messages in the chamber whilst this meeting is in progress. I have the following members who wish to speak under Council Rule Procedure 20.1. Item 3D, Councillors Davis and Councillor Green. Item 3A, Councillor Davis and Councillor Rogers. Would any other member who wishes to speak under Council Procedure Rule 20.1 please announce it now? No, thank you. The following applications have been reserved for public speaking. Item 3D, Little Cliffs End Farm, Chalk Hill, Ramsgate. Item 3A, land south of Canterbury Road, West, Ramsgate. Item 3B, garage block rear of 161 to 213 Clements Road, Ramsgate. And item 3C, site of the former Dane Valley Arms, Dane Valley Road, Margate. I have apologies from Councillor Wing, substituted by Councillor Munn, from Councillor Rattigan, substituted by Councillor Towning. Are there any other apologies? And are there any declarations of interest? I have one, yes.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make sure that the 3C, Dane Valley Arms, I'm a ward councillor in Dane Valley ward, and I just wondered if that could cause any problem.
No, that's absolutely fine. It happens to all of us that at some point items in our own ward, that alone doesn't count. Thank you. I now have a point of information. I'm going to hand over to Mr. Livingstone.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. First point of information is item 3D, A04, Little Cliffs End Farm, Chalk Hill. We'll take that item first. So it's 4 in the agenda. As members will be aware, it's been deferred from the meeting last week, so we're going to take that item first in that. Then I have a few points of information. The main one is that the government today published both a revised MPPF and the 2022 results of the housing delivery test. So the update to the MPPF removes the requirement for a 5-year supply of housing land to be demonstrated by authorities with a local plan of that's less than 5 years old, which applies to Thanet. However, the 2022 results of the housing delivery test, which looks at the completions for 3 years up until the 31st of March 2022, looks at the requirement in the local plan for the delivery of housing, factoring in a discount for COVID, shows that the district has delivered 71% of the housing need in that period. So this means that the tilted balance outlined in the new paragraph 11 of the MPPF would be engaged for any decision that the council issues tomorrow on the applications for housing that's being discussed tonight. So therefore, for items 3A, 3B and 3C, all of which are for housing, the council should grant permission unless any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policies of the MPPF taken as a whole, and therefore the recommendation for those items is not updated following the changes to the MPPF today. In another update on item 3A, which is the land south of Canterbury Road, West, Ramsgate, there's an error in the conclusion at the end of the report outlines a recommendation which isn't reflected at the top of the report above the conditions. So I just want to read out, just to confirm what the motion is, the recommendation is that officers are putting forward. So the recommendation is to defer and delegate the application for approval, subject to the receipt of a legal agreement to secure the outlined heads of terms and safeguarding conditions, with the adoption of the shadow appropriate assessment at Annex 5. And so the recommendation, just to confirm, that's in the conclusion of the report, but it's not at the top of the report. So just to confirm exactly what the recommendation is of officers. And then regarding item 3C of Dane Valley Arms, so condition 7 on the application as stated in the agenda pack requires a verification report prior to the commencement of development following works carried out in a detailed remediation scheme being carried out to remove unacceptable risks to human health from contaminated land. So TDC Environmental Health have confirmed subsequent to the publishing of the agenda that condition 7 should be worded so that the required work is carried out prior to the occupation of the development, and with no requirement for any works if no contamination is identified within the submission of a remediation scheme under the earlier condition 6. So it's the timing of that condition that we are updating in the recommendation so that it doesn't have to occur prior to the commencement of development, it has to occur prior to the occupation, and that requirement under condition 7 would not be in force if there is no contamination on the site. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any site visits will take place for committee members on the morning of Friday, the 5th of January 2024. So now we can move on to the items that have public speaking. Item 3D, Little Cliffs End Farm, Chalk Hill, Ramsgate. First, I have speaking in favour of the application, Mr. John Elvidge. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. It's always challenging to speak in support of an application when the item is recommended for approval for fear of repetition, and when officers have comprehensively addressed all material planning considerations and weighed them in the planning balance in order to reach their conclusions. I'd therefore like to focus on just 2 aspects of the submission, one of which has been raised by third parties, namely the partially retrospective nature of the development, together with the second of what could be regarded as personal circumstances, not of the applicant, but of interested parties. Firstly, planning guidance provides for the submission of retrospective planning applications, with paragraph 12 of the guidance on enforcement specifically stating that a local planning authority can invite a retrospective planning application if they consider that an application is the appropriate way forward to regularise the situation. It is also accepted in case law that the planning system and policies are not punitive, and the retrospective nature of any application doesn't weigh against the development. As members will be aware from the report, the grazing and keeping of horses has been established upon this farm for in excess of 20 years, with the applicant successfully achieving expansion of this use in June 2021, following an approval of permission under delegated powers and in the absence of any third-party representations or objections from any quarter. When the applicant started to receive requests for grazing facilities from the owners of horses being kept at another grazing business in the district, which was due to close, it was felt that a further increase in grazing at Little Cliffs End Farm was not only essential due to the predicament of local horse owners and their animals, but which should be achievable in the light of the previous approval. Also, and in order to supplement the relative paucity of the local bridleway network, it was considered necessary to provide additional exercise facilities in the form of a lunge and a sand school, the most appropriate location for which was thought to be to the north of the existing line of conifers adjoining the main access into the paddocks, and which would then be set against the view of the current planting and development without impinging upon views of Pegwell Bay when seen from Chalk Hill, Canterbury Road East and the Lord of the Manor. In order to further reduce any impact upon the landscape and visual character of the countryside, as well as providing screening around the facilities to lessen disturbance for horses from the movement of cars and commercial and agricultural vehicles, it was decided to create planted bunds around the facilities, which in turn adds to the biodiversity interests of the wider holding. It is therefore hoped that members will take these important points into account when weighing the planning balance for this development, which has received not one letter of objection from any member of the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking on behalf of Cliffsend Parish Council, Councillor Chapman, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair and Councillors. I'm speaking on behalf of Cliffsend Parish and Pegwell Ward Councillor Young, who is unable to be here this evening for personal reasons. Our objections are not about the keeping of horses in principle, although we would prefer the site remain growing crops as it's Grade 1 and Grade 2 agricultural land. I'm concerned about the contamination of our drinking water, of your drinking water. The site is in drinking water protection zones 1 and 2, as designated by the Environment Agency. Zone 1 is the most sensitive zone rating there is. It has strict regulations about not contaminating the groundwater supply. Our concerns are about the disposal of the horse manure, and that is thousands of tonnes of horse manure and contaminated hay and straw per year. To appreciate the scale of this, current estimates of where the horses are kept are between 40 to 50 stable blocks that have already been built over an area of 49 acres, currently housing around 120 horses. This number of horses alone produces 800 to 1,000 metric tonnes of manure per year, and that's likely to increase as there is no set limit on this application. The applicant has been dumping horse manure onto a Zone 1 site close to an aquifer. It's even captured on Google Maps, and that is illegal. On 2 occasions this year, the Environment Agency has had cause to instruct the applicant to remove it. On the most recent occasion, he was witnessed literally bulldozing it into the Zone 1 field, which is also against the law. Therefore, we maintain that the applicant must produce details of how he will dispose of thousands of tonnes of manure legally to the satisfaction of the Environment Agency. He has not done so. Furthermore, a necessary condition must also be that contamination testing is scheduled to be carried out at defined regular intervals, again to the satisfaction of the EA and TDC Environmental Health. In short, we must ensure we believe that Thanet residents do not become ill through drinking contaminated water. Let's not repeat what happened at the aquifers in Margate and in Poorhole Lane near Westwood Cross in recent years. They were both poisoned with waste, commercial waste. And do we really want to ignore the lessons of history? Thank you.
Thank you. We do need to be careful when considering when allegations are made about things that have been happening, as we cannot take those into account. Next speaking under Council Rule 20.1, Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to what you said about allegations, I think it's more than an allegation, because if we check the paperwork in the application, the Environment Agency originally actually objected to this application on the basis that manure had been dumped illegally in an adjacent field. That adjacent field is still having material dumped in it. It's been complained about to planning enforcement. We await a response on that and what's actually happening, or what they say is happening, but there is daily evidence that this field is being used for dumping manure in a ground area Zone 1. That's a matter of fact, not supposition, and I can guarantee that because we have stood and personally witnessed it. However, I think there are various issues on this, and as my colleague on my left has said, we don't object to the keeping of horses. However, there's some pretty strange claims here. Crump's Farm is mentioned in the application as the farm that was closed and why they need additional stabling for horses. If you look back on your own records of this committee from September when Crump's Farm was approved, it's 7 houses on a couple of acres. And it clearly states in that application that the storage units that were going to be converted to residential were former stables. So I don't believe that the establishment of this site has anything to do whatsoever with Crump's Farm, and it's just a convenient claim. What concerns us is there is no limit on what goes on there. There is mention of 40 horses, which again we can then perhaps look at a defined amount of manure and how that would affect the aquifers. But again, and I would reiterate, we have 2 aquifers so far, in fact 3, because there's another one that's shut down at the moment if you check with Southern Water, and it's all to do with ground contamination. In order for this to be approved, I believe there need to be some very real conditions applied to it, including the management of the manure, where it is stored, how it is stored, and and we need proper monitoring to ensure that the Environment Agency's rules are adhered to here, because they've been played fast and loose with in the past. I believe there was an error in the previous approval of horses, because from memory, there is a reference to dumping manure in the field across the road, which I believe was put in by an officer. That is an illegal act because it's a Zone 1 groundwater source. The Environment Agency objected to this on that basis. They have withdrawn their objection, but it is subject to a lot of conditions, and these conditions need to be written into this permission if it's granted. The other issue are the bunds. So SP26 in the local plan clearly states that the views across Pegwell are to be unencumbered and they're specially protected along with other areas on this island. There's already a bund been built there, which is blocking partly the view of the sea across the fields. If you don't believe me, go and have a look with a site visit. The application is basically to build all these bunds and destroy the open views. That flies directly in the face of the local plan and SP26. I think I've said quite a lot, and I'll hand you over.
I need to stop you there.
Thank you, Chair.
I did have Councillor Green speaking under Rule 20.1. He's not present. I'm going to hand over to the Planning Applications Manager, who I believe will come back to you on some of the points you've raised.
Thank you, Chair. So the application is a part retrospective application for the change of use of agricultural land for the keeping of horses, formation of access routes, sand school, lunge, parking areas and bunds. So the main issues for members to consider are the principle of development, the impact on the countryside and agricultural land, the impact on the character and appearance of the area, specifically the landscape character area, the impact on the environment and also on highways safety. So the site is outlined here in red. So you can see the Little Cliffs End Farm enclosure of buildings at the bottom of the drawing there. You can see the main Sandwich Road on the left-hand side. And if we look at the aerial image, you can see Chalk Hill running along east to west at the top. So this is an image from probably a bit more than a year ago from Google, which shows the existing operation of the keeping of horses to the east of the Little Cliffs End Farm set of buildings. So this is a block plan of the actual proposal itself. I'm showing this for context just because to understand the views of the site, members need to understand the proposal. Now, in the vast majority of works that are being applied for have actually been carried out. So these photos, which were taken a month ago, will show members the impact of the vast majority of the development. So first of all, we're going to look at a view from the A299. So we are very much at the north, near the Lord of the Manor roundabout. So the top of the image that you've got there. So the conifers that you can see in the middle of the image there, where the mouse is circling, is the Little Cliffs End Farm site. Mention's been made of a bund, which is this area here, so on the left-hand side. So this isn't on the application site, it's not part of the application, so it's not one of the bunds that's being applied for. Then looking from Sandwich Road, so specifically looking just next to Sandwich Road, so going up, so Chalk Hill Junction is in the distance, and you can see the footpath that runs up. So again, that bank of conifers that's surrounding the Little Cliffs End Farm buildings are on the right-hand side of the image here. And then moving up, and this is an image from Google directly to just show the junction, the existing access on for Chalk Hill on Sandwich Road. So this is the access that's currently used by all of the businesses that occupy the development in and around Little Cliffs End Farm. And then we're going to have a little look inside the site. So for the proposal itself, I mentioned about the works that have been carried out. So the access trackways have been built. So if we are at the first junction of the tracks and we're looking down the long length of the track, and you'll see this image here, you've got fences that have been put up already and the horses that are in situ. So this is the route that goes all the way basically west to east down the site. If we turn to the right to look towards, and you can see actually on the right hand side of the image here, you can see the bank of conifers I mentioned surrounding Little Cliffs End Farm. So if we turn then and we're looking north to south, looking down the route that currently takes you to the Little Cliffs End Farm site. So you can see here one of the bunds that's the subject of the application running along here, and then going down there and then turning back and looking back towards where that photo was taken. You can see the change in level that occurs as you go down towards the Little Cliffs End Farm site, and you can see those the field shelters and the boundary treatments that have been erected that we were just standing next to. So looking at the detail of the arrangement just to the north of the Little Cliffs End Farm site. So you have a vehicle parking area which is proposed on the west of this part of the development. Then you have bunds surrounding that and surrounding the lunge. And then you have the sand school itself and another access trackway there. You have a bund that runs east to west. And then you've actually got just outside the red line, you've got the access road that runs to the other keeping of horses sort of paddocks, which have already got permission and are in place. So this is a view, so you can see again, there's the Little Cliffs End Farm site. You can see the parking area which was under construction at the time of the photo being taken. Then looking in the middle of this site, looking towards the lunge, you have the view here. So you can see the bunds themselves have been formed around the lunge, and then turning to the right from that, so we're looking to the north, so you can see there's the trackway going up to the paddocks, and then you've got the sand school and the enclosure around the sand school on the right hand side of the image. And then turning to the right again, so we're actually outside the site, the red line site, so this is the access that goes down towards the other element of the site, which is the keeping of horses, which, as mentioned, was granted approval a few years ago. And then again, the conifers on the right-hand side that you can see there. And then turning back, so again, conifers now on the left-hand side, so just again showing the access way, so you can again see that already some planting has occurred on the bund that's been formed on the right-hand side, and then obviously you've got the other bund on the further to the right, which is to the north of the site. So then just looking at the views across from Chalk Hill, which is all the areas that we're looking at, we were just looking at are not publicly accessible, but obviously we really need to look at the views across the landscape from Chalk Hill. So here is the view looking down. Again, we're in Chalk Hill now, we're looking down towards those conifers, as mentioned, so that's where the bunds are in front of. And then looking at a bit more of a close-in view, so you can see from looking at this image, you have the bunds themselves that form part of the application along just below the conifers there. And then turning to the left, just so you can see, then you've got the view of the expanse at the moment across the fields. So, as I mentioned, one of the main considerations is the principle of development. So this is covered in page 79 of the agenda report. So policy SP24 for development in the countryside, its officers' views that this is considered to be the growth or expansion of an existing rural business, and therefore it is considered to be in accordance with policy SP24. In terms of the impact on agricultural land, the land is best and most versatile agricultural land, and policy E16 requires that that we shouldn't be in a position to grant a major development resulting in the loss of best and most versatile unless specific criteria is met. Now, the vast majority of this development is not irreversible loss of agricultural land. It's only the very small amount, arguably, of the parking area, so it doesn't constitute major development to be contrary to that policy. That is, it's reversible development, and therefore we consider that it is acceptable in principle. In terms of the impact on the landscape character area, SP26, it's within one of the landscape character areas, the Wantsum North Shores. The main principles and characteristics that are covered under the survey want to ensure that that development avoids skyline intrusion, to ensure that long uninterrupted views and a flat landscape are maintained. It is considered that the development would not compromise those characteristics. You've seen obviously the views in and around, especially given the siting adjacent to the existing site of the development within the countryside at Little Cliffs End Farm. In terms of the field shelters themselves, they are all obviously single-storey structures, so without needing planning permission you can erect field shelters as long as they meet the tests of operational development, whether or not they are permanently attached to the ground, and how they are attached to the ground. And we don't consider that, from the views that have been taken at the moment, that those developments in and of themselves need planning permission. But obviously they are part and parcel with the use. So you have got that sort of development within this, within this use that's being put forward. So in terms of the impact of the environment, as identified initially, the Environment Agency objected and raised concerns with regards to the location of a vast majority of the site, not the vast majority of the site, but a large amount of the site is covered under Source Protection Zone 1. It's also in a nitrate vulnerable zone. Specifically, this has been looked at and discussed with the EA, and you'll see from the discussion on on page 75 that the further comments that we've received from the Environment Agency have considered that the additional information about how the manure will be spread across the fields and not stored on Source Protection Zone 1 satisfactorily deals with the concerns raised, and therefore, and I'm going to quote what the Environment Agency have stated, which is on page 76, that subject to a one planning condition, they withdrew their objection. Specifically, that condition requires that during the development, contamination not previously identified found to be present should be, basically the development should be ceased, and remediation strategy should be carried out in accordance with advice from the local planning authority, and until that remediation strategy has been submitted, approved, and then subsequently implemented, development shouldn't continue. Specifically though, with regards to the concerns that have been raised, there is an informative that's proposed to be put on the application, and this is again outlined in the Environment Agency's comment, which basically outlines that manure, if it is stored in Source Protection Zone 1, it's got to be stored on an impermeable base and with sealed drainage. There can't be any temporary storage of manure on those areas, and effectively that temporary storage can occur on the Source Protection Zones 2 and 3, but not on Zone 1. This is specifically discussed on page 85 of the committee report, and obviously as the lead authority on the matter, the Environment Agency have not required the local planning authority to condition the location of storage, but they asked for the informative to be added. Now, the Environment Agency themselves have various powers in the event that manure, for example, in this instance, is stored in Source Protection Zone 1, and indeed they have been in contact with the applicant on an ongoing basis. So it is considered that by putting on the informative and noting that the Environment Agency themselves have powers under their own legislation for any issues to be dealt with, that this is adequate as stated in the recommendation with the informatives and the unsuspected contamination condition. So picking up a couple of the other points that are raised in the responses that we received, It's considered that the development would result in sufficient parking to be provided. No objection has now been raised by Highways, so this is an update since the publishing of the report. We have received a comment from KCC raising no objection. That's been published on the online portal. It's obviously that access that I showed you earlier onto Chalk Hill is currently in use by all of the businesses that are working on Little Cliffs End Farm, so it isn't considered that that is an unsafe junction. And that there is parking available on site. I think the estimate that's been given is about 20 cars with horse boxes, but obviously there are various times when that would occur. It's unlikely to be that they're all there at the same time because of the way that the horses are kept. So there are two other conditions that I just want to mention to members. One is that obviously there would be a concern if there was lighting erected in and around the sand school that hasn't currently been submitted to us because of the potential for skyline intrusion and light pollution, and therefore there is a condition which would require that if there is any lighting to be erected, that has to be first submitted to the local planning authority prior to its installation. And in addition, Condition 5 outlines that within 12 weeks of the date of any approval, a landscaping plan must be submitted, which should demonstrate basically planting on the earth buns with a species rich of grassland mix, and also providing details of how they're going to be established and the management of them. So overall, it is considered that the application would accord with the policies of the local plan, and therefore it is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I move that the Chair's the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
And before I go into the debate, and I do have a couple of people who want to speak, we're just going to take a short break for a discussion up here. Thank you. Councillor Garner and Councillor Munns, would you come to the front bench, please? Thank you, members. Our apologies for that. It turns out that Councillor Munns is not able to remain as a voting member of the committee because he's not on the official reserve list. We will be sorting that out at the next full council, but that's the cause for the pause in the proceedings. If everyone's ready, we'll now move on to the debate. Yes, I've just been asked to remind you that we did move the motion and it was seconded and everyone agreed. Yes, thank you. So first speaking, I've got Councillor Alban.
Took me by surprise there, Chair. I didn't think I was the first one. Having listened to the previous speakers, I do have some concerns, and I think the matter about the effects of the water system there is a considerable consideration that we must take very seriously. And I'm just surprised that the Environment Agency had overturned their initial view. However, there's obviously been a lot of engineering works taking place there. The car park, if we're talking, as Mr. Livingston said, of 20 vehicles and maybe horse boxes, etc., etc. This is a major. This is going to have a major effect on that piece of land there. I think as well, looking at the conditions, and especially condition 2, about the contamination. There is no condition following on from the contamination of horse manure, etc., and what the applicant will do with it. I'm just taking up a point I think Councillor Davis made about there being, just taking up what Councillor Davis had said. There is no restriction on the amount of horses, and looking at the previous, looking at one of the first pictures that you put up, showing the view looking down from an aerial view, which that isn't, thank you. As you say, you could see where the current use of the horses on those lands is completely are no longer green, effectively. So depending on how many horses that you're going to have on there, you know, I don't think there's enough land for, let's say, putting 40 horses on there, for instance. Anyway, they're just some of the concerns that I have, and I just think it is changing the landscape of that part of Cliff's End, and I have concerns about this. Thank you. Oh, it's that one.
Just one thing. Obviously, yeah, absolutely right. There's no restriction on the number of horses by virtue of condition or indeed as part of the submission. It's worth noting that there are sort of size restrictions which come from basically animal welfare in terms of how many you can keep in a paddock and horse. But in terms of the actual extent of covering that area with paddocks, obviously that is what is potentially proposed. As you can see, it's, you know, sorry, the reason I skipped onto this one is because obviously this is showing obviously what it is like at the moment. So it is something that obviously is proposed in there in terms of the character of the fact that it was obviously previously a field. Obviously the actual important point about the character of the area here is the landscape character area and those views that you'd get, which is why that area is designated. And obviously on the basis of the small scale structures that are there and present, in our view it's not considered to cause harm to that. In terms of the manure aspect, you know, what's been submitted to the Environment Agency is that the manure would be spread throughout the source protection zones, which is 2. Obviously, the farm holding is over 5 hectares of land, so it is a large farm holding that you can spread manure across. And obviously, there's lots of agricultural development that's occurring all around the district, which obviously, where soil and manure is spread across fields, that doesn't require planning permission in and of itself. But obviously, that's why in this instance the Environment Agency have been directly involved. You know, our contaminated land officer, our environmental protection manager has been in contact directly with the Environment Agency over sort of the ongoing concerns that have been raised by residents, and it is being managed both by, in terms of the council's contact with the EA and also the EA looking into the queries that have been raised. So we do consider that it's being covered, you know, by the work that the Environment Agency are doing.
Can I come back, Chair? That's all right. So I just missed one point out, and that is in relation to condition 2. For submission of details, as the business is already commencing, is already started and is already happening, is there a restriction on time for them to submit the required details? Only it doesn't say in condition 2.
So it specifically, it's what we'd refer to as the unsuspected contamination condition. So it's that whilst during development, if any source of contamination is found, then a remediation strategy is required. So obviously this is part retrospective, and obviously the work that's still being carried out to form the parking area and those areas is what the Environment Agency specifically have targeted and looked at in this instance.
Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. I personally feel this is a perfectly acceptable change of use, but I do think that the concerns raised by our speakers tonight are very serious ones. I'm not going over the same ground again, I know, but I feel that the requirements laid down by the Environment Agency need to be carefully monitored. Is there anything that can be written in to ensure that this is carried out? Because I do think it's very important, and I think the welfare of our residents is at risk. Thank you.
We'll come back on that in a moment. Councillor Keane.
Thank you. Firstly, can someone just explain to me what the purpose of the bunds are? And I noticed that it gives the height measurements and they're 3 metres, but could they be higher if someone decided to build them higher? That's just my first part.
I must admit I can't speak to the purpose of the bunds other than to enclose those areas. In terms of the height, there's a condition requiring the development to occur in accordance with the plans, and the plans include the measurements. So that's the condition that restricts it.
Okay. And then also, and you sort of referred to this in one of your previous comments, but it sounds like we can't limit the number of horses that can be kept there, and yet that would also affect the amount of manure produced. I know you said about animal welfare standards, but because the manure affects things, then where does planning stand for that?
So in terms of the justification for a condition to restrict the number of horses, in and of itself, there's no additional landscape and visual impact, for example, that would justify restricting the number of horses. If it related specifically to the quantity of manure produced, if obviously on the basis that as long as the applicant disposes of that in accordance with in accordance with the Environment Agency's regulations, then there is no reason to restrict the number of horses, because as long as they're according with the separate legislation, then there's no rationale for us to restrict it on planning grounds alone. It obviously does, as you say, it does require them to adhere to the Environment Agency's regulations. And to pick up the points that's been raised about the monitoring of that, we have through the concerns that have been raised by residents. It has been raised a lot, and the Environment Agency have been involved for at least the last 6 months in looking at this site and other sites in and around there. But they have also been in contact with the applicant and engaging with the applicant about the issue. So in terms of where we are now is that the Environment Agency are satisfied with the arrangements that are in place, and if they weren't, they would be able to take action and instruct that operations that are occurring on site, either a licence would need to be submitted, a permit would need to be submitted if there was going to be any storage on Source Protection Zone 1, but that's not the intention. It just needs to be accorded with in terms of the spread across the Source Protection Zones 2 and 3. So again, on the basis of the legislation that the Environment Agency are looking at, we are confident in and of itself that the planning permission, if granted, would not result in an identified harm to groundwater by virtue of the controls that are in place by the EA.
Thank you. I have Councillor Moore next, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ian, for that presentation. My main concern is what all the other members have already muted, which is the contamination to the aquifers and the water source for us. And it's very disappointing to see that the EA have been there repeatedly trying to sort this out with the applicant, which tells me the applicant reoffends and keeps doing it, which is worrying. And I think the local authority should take the high ground and ask the EA to take a higher interest in this to protect the aquifers and the water. I've got no problem with what the applicant's trying to do. It complies with all the legislation, as you rightly say, but the main concern is the contamination to the aquifers and how we, as a local authority, protect our residents, which we should be doing regardless. And if we have to keep going on at the EA to do that, then so be it. But we need to do something to protect that as a local authority. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back, I think it's really important that members are aware that obviously there are allegations that have been made. It's really important that members are considering the merits of this particular application and just taking into account that and disregarding allegations that are made. If allegations or anything that's investigated separately will be dealt with separately as part of the Environment Agency's legislation, or indeed Thanet District Council and looking at planning enforcement side of things, but it needs to be disregarded from the consideration of this application. Thank you.
I do have a couple of other speakers lined up, but I'd like to ask a question that continues on really from the mention of Councillor Moore. The enforcement of Environment Agency regulations, you've mentioned a couple of times about the Environment Agency have got regulations. How are they enforced? We have our own planning enforcement for the planning regulations, but what about things that are not directly us?
Thank you, Chair. It's fundamentally a matter for the Environment Agency in terms of, it can result in your standard punitive measures of fines, etc. I think it's important that the Environment Agency, like our planning enforcement, would look to regularise the situation if there is something that's found that's contravening regulations, for example the storage of manure on Source Protection Zone 1, to actually remedy the problem by removing it is obviously the first thing, but in terms of the actual enforcement powers, I'm afraid I don't know the exact quantity of fine or that side of things of what could be done. It is a matter entirely for the EA.
So it's out of our control? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Councillor Matterface.
Thank you, Chair. To pick up Councillor Keane on the bonds, one assumes they're there for landscaping, but also wind protection, because it's obviously open to the sea. The highest is 3 metres and the lowest is 2 metres, but they're not a continuous thing. So they don't actually completely block the view. They're there. And it states quite clearly they must be sown with species-rich grassland mix, so they're not going to be trees on the top of them. I can't personally see a problem with that. I've got a couple of quick questions. It quite clearly states in here in the informatives that they can't store any manure within Protection Zone 1. It states that quite clearly. 2 and 3, apparently it's okay. And my final question, do we know how many horses are currently there? I know it's been said we can't actually impose a limit, but it gives a rough idea of how much more this applicant is trying to add to what he's already got.
Well, I'm afraid I don't have the information on that.
Councillor Driver.
Yeah. So I would just like to actually point out to members that actually, in fact, actually, the dog manure is actually quite toxic, but actually, cow and actually horse manure it is toxic, but they eat grass, so therefore it's not a major thing, and that's it really.
Thank you. Do I have any other speakers? In that case,
Living as I do near Elmwood Farm at North Foreland, there are horses there. I don't know how many. There's probably about 30 or 40 there. And they are not kept in one field all the time. They rotate them from one field to the other field and then plant that one. Would these horses be on that land all the time in where they are? Is there any intention to move them around to other areas? Or are they all going to be in the fenced off bit? Do we know that?
So if I go back, well, let's go back to the red line plan. Yeah, so
be moved from one site to the other, presumably, depending how the grass is.
Yeah, so the red line effectively goes round down Chalk Hill all the way around in that sort of downwards L shape. So I mean, technically they can be moved around. Obviously, they've been demarked, as you can see from the photos at the moment.
Okay. Councillor Bright.
Yeah, just really quickly, it's just about the sort of planting on the buns. Thinking about Elmwood Farm, it is, and because the horses are rotated, it does give the fields an opportunity to sort of grow and sort of re-wild, if you like. I'm a little bit concerned looking at that it does look very sort of barren and very sparse. I know there is a condition that they have to plant the buns with grasses and things. How soon will that planting take place? Thank you.
So the condition requires the details to come in within 12 months of any approval, but within the details, it's got to include the timescales to be agreed, basically. So the aim will obviously be to make sure that it's planted at the time when it's going to actually take, effectively, but it's not mandated by the condition, but they have to provide the details of when they would plant them.
In that case, we will now put the motion for the officer's recommendation for approval to the vote. Can I have those in favour, please? And against? It's carried in favour. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is land south of Canterbury Road West, Ramsgate. Public speaking in favour of the application, Mr Dan Narowski, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. After more than 2 years of consultation and positive engagement with your officers and other key stakeholders, this application represents a positive opportunity for the people of Thanet. Monson Homes is ready to deliver 141 high-quality and sustainable new homes, key infrastructure and almost £2.5 million worth of investment to support and improve existing community facilities. The site is located within a sustainable and accessible location, particularly benefiting from the excellent connectivity to the wider area offered by the newly constructed Thanet Parkway train station. The station lies just to the south of the site and is easily accessed via the newly dedicated pedestrian and cycle routes. The proposals will deliver much needed market and affordable homes to begin to address the identified needs of the area and provide a range of dwelling types and sizes to help young families to grow, to help more elderly residents to downsize and to help first-time buyers onto the housing ladder, thereby achieving a mixed and balanced community. Monson Homes is a wholly owned subsidiary of Town & Country Housing, who are themselves a registered provider. Therefore, we want to deliver as many affordable homes as possible.
It's what we do and do well, as evidenced here in Thanet by our Westwood Acres scheme and the Phase 1 development directly to the north of this site. Unlike the PLC house builders, we will maintain ownership of the estate as well as the affordable housing and have a vested interest in making sure the properties are finished to a high quality and are well managed. Given the very real viability challenges faced at this site, as independently verified by the Council's appointed specialists, the scheme will deliver 22% affordable housing. This nonetheless represents a significant positive contribution towards affordable housing stock in the village and is a major benefit of the scheme. We agree with your officer's assessment that the proposals represent a natural expansion of the village and will be in keeping with the typical development pattern of Cliffs End. The attractiveness of the scheme is further enhanced through the significant over-provision of open space and green infrastructure to serve the existing and new residents, as well as delivering biodiversity net gains for wildlife. This will ensure the proposals sit comfortably within the policy and contribute positively towards the character of the local area. The proposals are accepted against all technical matters and will deliver significant positive benefits to the community through local infrastructure improvements secured through the Section 106 financial contributions. As such, it is kindly requested that the committee recognise the benefits of this scheme and duly approve this application. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Speaking on behalf of Cliffs End Parish Council, Councillor Chapman, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair and members. Again. We have some serious concerns with this planning application regarding several NPPF and TDC policies not being adhered to, plus objections raised by TDC officers and councillors. The proposed 145 houses are over and above those identified for growth in the local plan. They are not included in the additional local plan developments being built in Cliffs End. This application would increase the size of Cliffs End to over 40%. This is how you destroy a rural village and contravene policy H09. And it is on Grade 1 agricultural land as designated by Natural England DEFRA map. The TDC Strategic Planning Manager does not support this application because Cliffs End has, quote, limited services that was not considered suitable for a significant level of housing, page 56 in your pack. The inspector's report has considered the new Parkway station and concluded that it alone, quote, does not create a sustainable location for increased levels of development, unquote. The TDC Strategic Housing Department also state that this application cannot be supported because the developer has reduced the number of affordable homes from 30% to 22%, page 57 in your pack. Add to this Kent Police concern that the site does not follow guidance to addressing designing out crime, page 59. The case officer's report acknowledges that several policies are not adhered to, including, just for the record, SP01, SP24, H01, E16, SP26, plus there are infringements of NPPF sections 2, 5, 8, 9 and 15. We submitted a full and detailed list of these, plus photos and maps. Disappointingly, important sections and photos have been removed from your packs for some reason, but they are still on the planning website. Some of the case officer's approval relies on the developer's own assessments, such as their claim that this will have no significant impact on the open view across to Pegwell Bay, to Dover Straits and beyond. This is protected under Policy 26 and the Council's Landscape Character Area Report, and the developer's assessment that the agricultural land is of poor quality, page 64 of your pack, so is not so important. We maintain that it's not appropriate to rely on developer marking their own homework. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking under Council Rule 20.1, Councillor Rogers, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman and members. I would like to highlight the serious safety risk and lack of appropriate S106 mitigation for Cliffs End. Foes Hill is the only road that connects the north of the village to the south. It's a single track, very narrow, with a downhill gradient from the level crossing, and has no footpath or verge. All the amenities are in the south: the village hall, play area, sports field and cafe bar. An additional 145 houses in the north of the village would result in many more people and much more traffic using Foats Hill. The only other access to the south of the village is through a field and an alley, totally unsuitable for pushchairs, wheelchairs, disabled people and people walking alone. The appropriate mitigation would be to build a footpath for approximately 135 metres. There is space to do so. The case officer's report states this is not achievable because the applicant is not the landowner. This is not a valid reason for rejection. Cliffsend Parish Council and the residents believe that the council has a duty of care to properly consider this. The case officer acknowledges that no assessment of community facilities have been carried out, as stated on page 98. And although Cliffsend Parish Council was not consulted on this initially, they proactively submitted appropriate requirements in accordance with the NPPF. All those requirements have been rejected without proper dialogue, apart from the £10,000 towards building disabled toilets, which falls short even for that. The financial contributions to go outside Cliffsend total £2 million. This is out of all proportion and not in line with the NPPF. There's no doctor's surgery, dentist or shops in Cliffsend, apart from the garage on Sandwich Road. There's no amenities to the north of Cliffsend. If a site visit could be arranged, it would highlight our safety concerns regarding Foats Hill. Thank you.
Thank you. And also speaking under Council Rule 20.1, Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I think my colleagues either side have raised most of the points extremely well. However, I'd like to just highlight a couple of factors, and particularly the fact that Cliffsend is a village of two halves, separated by a single track lane with no pedestrian facilities, no lighting or anything, and it's a death trap. And for an officer to say that because the land adjacent to the road isn't owned by the applicant, so it's not relevant, is frankly bemuses me. However, there are mitigations, and I think, firstly, I think we should not be building on agricultural land, and we know that. I'm very pleased to hear the Home Secretary of State's decision today to remove the 5-year land supply requirement, because that, I believe, is our major vulnerability locally, because of the fact that our local plan is sitting in abeyance for an update. However, if that requirement is no longer there, then we, I believe, have a duty to our residents and so on to look at the cost to the residents relative to the risk of whether it went to appeal by being denied. I don't think this is necessary. It's not in the local plan. It's not allocated land. It does not comply. I mean, why are we down to 22% affordable when our policy is 30%, and phase one, because it didn't sell, has gone 100% affordable and is not yet occupied? So why are we dropping it to 22% on phase two? Doesn't make any sense. There is an issue in that Cliffsend needs to be more sustainable, but it needs to be one village, because there's a shop application in to build a shop in the south side of the village. That doesn't help the top end of the village, and put in another couple of hundred people there is simply going to isolate them. There's no public transport facilities that are worth speaking of unless you traipse across the field to the Parkway station, but the bus services have been cut back. The village is isolated, and putting people out there, whether in affordable homes or not, is not going to, it's not sustainable. It's not viable at the moment. I've lived in Cliffsend, and sustainability was a long-term issue. So yes, it needs to grow in a sustainable way, but not in a way that puts hundreds of people's lives at risk, and divides the village basically. The strategic planning manager doesn't see any need for this. I've got a couple of other questions. I'd like to know why the members' pack, the briefing pack, was edited, and some very relevant information, including the errors and omissions from the NPPF, wasn't provided to them, because it might be sitting on the website, but it wasn't in the briefing pack, and I'm damn sure that every member of this committee looks at a briefing pack rather than referring to the website. Questions galore. I'll finish at that.
Thank you.
But I don't think this is necessary. Thank you.
I'm now asking the Principal Planning Officer to outline the report.
Thank you, Chair. This is the application site here, so outlined in red on this plan. So we have the A299 to the west and south of the site, Canterbury Road west to the north of the site, and Clive Road on the right-hand side here. And then you can see the area outlined in blue is in the same ownership as the applicant, and this has recently been constructed as a new housing development. So this is just showing you the local plan and the allocations for the village. So currently the sites that you can see highlighted in brown are the allocated housing sites within the village. So the areas to the south of the village have both had permission and been constructed. And then this area here is the area owned by the applicant, which has just recently been constructed as well, but not yet occupied. And then north of the Canterbury Road West is the Gentech site, which has had permission but has not come forward for development. And then the application site itself is in this location here, south of this allocation site. So this is just showing an aerial view of the village. The application site is in this area here. You can see that there's been lots of excavation work for the archaeology. So the area that you can see is basically the outline of the application. So it follows down below the previously approved housing site, and then there's an angled section here. So all this area that's excavated is the application site. So it's north of the A299, and as mentioned, it's in the northern part of the village, which is divided by the railway that runs through the middle. So the site isn't allocated in the local plan. So the proposal doesn't comply with the objectives of policies HO1 or SPO1, which do seek to provide housing either within the confines of villages or the urban area or on allocated housing sites. It also doesn't comply with policy SP24, which is the countryside policy, which doesn't refer to housing development and doesn't seek to approve housing development in the countryside again unless it's allocated. But again, all of these policies are up for assessment, and we need to look at whether the harm from the development outweighs the benefits. And given the fact, as Ian mentioned at the beginning of the meeting tonight, we still have to look at the MPPF and the fact that we are still we still have to look at whether the harm outweighs the benefits when assessing any site, even if it goes against some policies. We have to look at the local plan as a whole and balance everything up. So in terms of sustainability of the site, that has been mentioned a few times, and as heard, it has been mentioned by the strategic planning manager as well about concerns regarding the sustainability of the village when looking at allocations of housing within the village. The provision of Parkway Station, which is now open and in use, will make a big difference to sustainability in the village. So from the site itself, you can easily walk to the station within a few minutes, and therefore that is a big influence for this application in terms of improving sustainability for the site and within the village itself. In terms of facilities within the village, there is an existing hall and church in the southern part of the village, and there's now a cafe along Sandwich Road that's recently opened, which is also a bar, I believe. So that there's that facility in the south. And in terms of proximity to the urban area, this is just showing the proximity of the application site to the urban area. So bottom left of this slide is the application site, and then Manston Green development is in the top right-hand side here, and that's currently under construction. So it's an extant consent that's currently being built. Phase 1 is being constructed, and it does contain a primary school. So in terms of proximity to facilities, that needs to be a consideration, that there is going to be a primary school in this location here, which potentially is walking distance of the village once these improvements come through, and there's a footpath that runs along Canterbury Road West, and there will be scope to improve access to the primary school and to facilities in Manston Road, such as the Tesco's. So in terms of sustainability, we do feel the sustainability of the village is improving. There are limited services within the village at the moment, but there is there is the potential for this to improve and has improved through the Parkway Station provision. There's also the extant consent for a retail unit within the centre of the village as well, which again there's a current application that's pending, showing the intention of the applicant to try and continue with that and provide that service within the village. So that is just a consideration for members when thinking about sustainability. So just to show you then some views of the site and some photos of the site itself. So as I mentioned, this is the application site here, so the area where it's shown as excavated for the archaeology, and the site to the north is the site that's recently constructed. This area here was the drainage for that development, but actually would be included within this application site, and then drainage through this scheme would also serve that development as well. So this is just a view then from the east looking towards it, so you can see that the site is basically surrounded by the A299, so there will be long views into the site from the surrounding motorway, but also you can see that the site is bordered by existing residential development to the east and to the north through the new development. Then here where Parkway Station has been constructed, so you can see in proximity to it there's a footpath that runs across the bridge and then straight to the station, which as I mentioned can be walked within minutes from the site. So these are some photos now inside the application site. So this is taken from the southern boundary looking north. So this photo here, you can see the housing development to the north that's been constructed. So that's the one to the north that's under the same ownership. This proposal seeks to follow the western boundary of that built form. So the boundary of this site would be approximately here, following that built form, and then everything to the west that was in the red line is just open space. So housing wouldn't extend into the open space beyond what's already constructed to the north. So again, just a closer view of the houses. So through this proposal, the building types are very similar to the units within this scheme. So these ones that you can see are replicated through this application. And then a further view, so there's a different time of year when the fields have been cleared. And this is showing, again, from the south, looking up towards the site. This area here you can see was the drainage that was being provided. So the application site, again, would run along the boundary. So where you can see that far fencing, that's the boundary line of this application site. So it includes all of this area here. And this, again, you can see the development in the distance. This is the existing footpath that runs along the eastern boundary of the site and then connects onto the public right-of-way that runs along the southern boundary of the site, and then that connects through round to Parkway. So you can see it's a pedestrian and cycle link. And then again, you can see the pedestrian cycle link on the right-hand side, and again, the application site is in this location here. And now this is along the southern boundary of the site, so this is the existing public right-of-way that runs along the southern boundary. You can also see there's lots of landscaping that exists along the southern boundary as well. The land levels across the site change quite drastically, so to the east of the site it's higher than the west, and the south of the site is higher than the north, so there's quite a lot of slopes along the site. So at this point here is higher than the area you can see in the distance where and the boundary of the site is sort of approximately this level here. Now this is the footpath as it crosses over the A299 towards Parkway, which is on the left-hand side here. So again, you can see this is the existing public right-of-way, and now you can see the vegetation that exists, and obviously the ground level change from the A299 up to the application site. And this is so these are some Google images included within this because I couldn't stop. So this is taken now from the A299 from the southern boundary looking back towards the site. So now you can see the development that's been constructed, and again the boundary of this one would follow the same boundary, western boundary as that development. And then as you go further along, it becomes more hidden by the verge and the landscaping that exists along the southern boundary. This is taken from the other side of the road, so next to Parkway Station, looking back towards the application site. So again, on the left-hand side, you can see the existing houses again. And then, so we are now showing you from this location here where Parkway is across towards the site here. And then, so this is now in Parkway Station again, looking across. So Parkway and the site itself are similar level, but then the road is lower. So you will get more views of the site from the station, but less from the road to the south. And then again, a further view from Parkway Station looking towards the site. So in terms of views from the south, from this level, in terms of the impact, obviously there's the backdrop of the existing houses from this view. So there's no particular impact in terms of long distance views from this particular level, because the impact won't be much different to what you would get from the existing development that exists there. And then these are just a few photos showing Parkway Station and how later on I'll discuss the public right of way and how a new public right of way and improvements to the public right of way will help to provide a footpath link through the village from north to south. But this is just showing the public right of way, the pedestrian link once it gets into the station. And then on the right hand side here is one of the allocation housing sites that I showed you in the allocation slide. So this is the north of Cotterton Road site, and a public right of way or a pedestrian link would continue through from here to that development and down to Cotterton Road. So it's just showing you that view. So in terms of from the west, this is the west looking towards the application site, which is again in this location here. So at road level, there's again landscaping along the boundary of the site. From this point, the development's quite far away, so there'll be quite minimal views really from this distance, because you've got quite a lot of open space before you reach it. And then taken from the north, so from Country Road West, looking back down towards the application site, there's a few views here. So this is taken, so Canterbury Road West is on the left-hand side here. You can see, it's quite small, but you can see the housing development in this location here, and then the proposal would be in this location here, again following that same line. So in terms of the landscape character area, we've had the landscape character impact assessment submitted, and it has looked at the impact from views from all around the site. One of the main issues is whether there's going to be an impact on the views of Pegwell Bay, which you can see is in the distance here, but given the fact there's quite a lot of vegetation and the ground then slopes down, and again given the presence of the existing development here, it is felt that in terms of long distance views there would be quite, the backdrop would reduce the impact from the vegetation and from the existing built form that exists in the village. And again, the development is not extended into this open space here, so from the north there's very limited views going south because the development already exists to the north of the site. So again, this is now from Canterbury Road West again, just closer to the site. So you've got the approved development here, and the application site is just to the rear here. And then again, just showing closer views of the buildings. And then again, the distance here. So this is now the access into the site. So this is the existing vehicular access into the development to the north. This application would use this same access point. So it's just showing that that's present. It's quite a wide access with visibility onto Canterbury Road West. And then just a few photos showing the development. And here you can really see the ground level change as it drops away from Canterbury Road West. And again, you can see some of the unit types as well. So just to show you then the impact on neighbours, so Clive Road is in this location here, and you can see Cliffview Road in this location here. So in terms of Cliffview Road, the majority of the properties are bungalows. Some of them have accommodation at roof level, but they are mainly single storey in height. In Clive Road, there's a few more larger units. So this is in Clive Road. This is the closest property to the application site. I'll come back to this later on, but you can see there's quite a low boundary treatment currently between this unit and the site. And then there's just some examples of properties that are in Clive Road. So you can see many of them are bungalows. And then on the south side of Clive Road, there are a few two-storey dwellings close to the site. So these two units on the right-hand side are the ones closest to the development as well on the other side of the road. And then this is just showing the end of Clive Road. So in the plan I show you, this is being provided as an emergency access into the site. So this won't be a main access at all into the site other than for pedestrians and cyclists. And then the path that I showed you earlier on the eastern side of the boundary is in this location here. So you come along Clive Road and straight onto that cycle footpath link running down the eastern boundary of the site. And then there again you can see that path. So in terms of looking at the actual layout, this was the layout of the approved scheme that's been constructed. So you can see the access onto Canterbury Road, which runs down here. And then this proposal joins onto this road. So this is the proposed layout. So you can see the north of this slide is the approved scheme, and then how it joins on to now this proposed development. So the layout of the development is restricted slightly by constraints that exist on the site, including a gas main that runs through the site from northwest to southeast, and also a water main that runs along the eastern boundary of the site as well, which pushes units away from the neighbours because there's no ability to build over this particular area. So that has had some impact on the layout of the scheme. But otherwise, the scheme pretty much follows the pattern of development of the northern site, with a road that runs down, wraps around, so there is a loop road at the bottom and then a few cul-de-sacs coming off that main spine road through the middle. You can see there's a mix of unit types with semi-detached, detached and semi-detached, detached and terrace units through the site, as well as a flat block, which is in this location here. There's a number of open space areas within the site. So the bottom left of this slide, you can see a very large area that's open space. So this area will contain the drainage for the development. So it contains a number of the infiltration basins within this space, but this will also then be provided as a park area with a footpath that runs through and picnic area. And you can see landscaping shows that it would be screened around it with new tree planting as well. In this location here on the right, this is the equipped play area that would be provided within the site. And then there's another informal play space to the centre here. And then top left, there's a community garden with growing area with a shed and other facilities for the residents. And to the right-hand side of the equipped play space is also an orchard as well. So just a closer view of this, just so you can see it. So top left is that community space, and then the informal space, and then the southern part again just showing the open spaces in this location, and then the flat block on the right hand side. And then this is just a clearer view, just showing those open spaces, just so you can see it, because again the plans are quite small, so it's sometimes difficult to see. So this again on the top right is the park area with footpath running through, and you can see clearly in this now the infiltration basins that exist under the land. Top left is the equipped play area, so that will contain things such as they've suggested a table tennis court and a basketball ring and fitness equipment. So something that differs to the play area that's already been provided in the northern scheme, which is this equipment for smaller children. This would have something for maybe older children, so there's a bit of a variety across the two sites. Bottom left is the informal play space, and then the bottom right, you can just see the layout of that community space. So on this plan, you can also see the emergency access, which is in this location here. It joins onto Clive Road. So they're proposing to install retractable bollards in this location, so it would only be used for emergency vehicles. And along the southern boundary of the site, you can see that there's a landscape buffer proposed, which would also be provided with an acoustic fence in order to restrict noise impact from the railway and the road to future users of the development. So there's a mix of house types within the scheme, so the different colours show the different house types. All of them are two-storey. I had encouraged them to try and include a few more bungalows, which would have been more in keeping with the units that are present within CV Road. Along the southern boundary, these have dropped in height, and these are actually smaller units, which I'll show you later with the elevation plans. But otherwise, everything is two-storey with pitched roof or gable roofs. So these are some elevations showing the design of the units. So this first one is the two internal street elevations running through the spine road through the middle of the site. So you can just see there's quite a lot of space between units. They're not particularly cramped on the side. There's quite a lot of space between them, and these are the semi-detached and detached units that you can see. Then this is showing from Clive Road. So the top part of this slide, on the left-hand side are the existing properties in Clive Road. This property here is the flat block that's being provided, and then houses beyond that. So there's quite a big gap between the flat block and the nearest neighbouring properties, because this is the location of that pedestrian cycle link that runs south along the eastern boundary. In terms of scale of the units, you can see because the closest two properties in Clive Road are two-storey dwellings, the actual proposed dwellings don't actually differ significantly in scale to those units. Some amendments were made to this flat block from the original plans, just to try and improve the design and increase interest of the elevations. But so this is the front elevation, bottom left, and the side elevation on the right-hand side here. And then this is just another view showing the entire street elevation from Clive Road. So again, the flat block's top left, and then you can see the houses. And again, you can really see the ground level drop as well as you go west across the site. The bottom part of the slide is the northern section of that road. So again, the extension from Clive Road going west, this is the northern part of it. So again, quite a lot of spacing between the units, and a selection of just semi-detached and detached units there. And then this is the western edge. So this is one of the most important elevations, because this is the view that you'd get from the longer views from the north and from the west, looking towards the application site. So there's one long elevation on the top here, and then I've tried to break that down into two, just to make it slightly longer, so bigger even. So these two are the same as the top one, but this is basically showing the entire western elevation that you would get as it drops down. You can really see the ground level change as it drops down the site, and you can see there's quite a lot of space in between the units. There's a mix of some terrace units and then detached, and you can see there's a variety of materials being used, including black cladding, which is quite a good material in long distance views to avoid significant visual impact. And then these are just a few slides just showing a few more other unit types within the scheme. So you can see some of the terrace units on the top right. Again, a variety of different ones with porches and different features to the building. And again, another slide showing a few varieties of those. And then this is now along the southern boundary. So there was quite a lot of discussion with the applicants about this boundary. Originally, it came in with terraced units, and there was concern that because of the views that you would get from the A299 from the south, that would appear too dominant and wouldn't appear spacious enough, given the fact it's on the edge of the village. So we were really keen to make sure we had spacing in between the units, and also that the heights of the units would drop down as low as possible. So this is the final amendment we've had for the unit type along that southern boundary, which has dropped the eave level down to 1.5 stories, which we feel now is appropriate in the longer views from the site, and especially given the fact there's going to be the acoustic fencing and landscaping buffer in front of this unit. So this is the street elevation now that we've had from the applicant showing that. So the A299 you can see is run along here, and this was that grass verge that you saw earlier with the existing landscaping, and you can see that with the drop in height, the eave level is now close to the level of the top of the landscaping. So all you'll really see from this view is going to be the roofs of the units. The bottom slide is incorporating the proposed landscaping that the applicants have recommended. So they're proposing new tree planting along that southern boundary, and through the landscape impact assessment, they've looked at the impact from the tree planting over a construction period, a 1-year period, and a 15-year period. So the trees down on this bottom slide is showing what would happen over time as the trees establish. So the largest tree is basically upon 15 years of time passing, how big the trees would be and the impact that would have to try and reduce the visual impact from the south. And then these are just some images that they've produced to show what they consider would be the impact from the road level looking up towards the development with that additional tree planting that's being introduced. So in terms of building material, this shows the variety of materials being proposed. So it includes a few different red bricks, multi-stocks, and some other bricks, and a buff brick as well. Then there would be dark boarding and tile hanging. So it's all quite traditional in terms of materials and really the design of the units, which are considered to be in keeping with the general pitch roof design of properties within the village. In terms of looking at the impact on the neighbours, so the main neighbours affected are these neighbours. So this is turned around now, so this is the eastern boundary, but just so you can see it in close detail, these are the neighbours in Cliffview Road and then Clive Road here. So in terms of the distance from these properties, because of that water main that runs along the eastern boundary, there's a distance of approximately 33 metres from the rear elevation of these properties to the nearest neighbour, which is quite important given the fact that the neighbours are bungalows and there's currently not really any overlooking of their properties. So really it needs to significantly exceed the 21 metres that we would normally look at. So with 33 metres, we feel that this is sufficient to avoid any significant overlooking. In this area here, there's the play area adjacent to the nearest neighbouring property in Clive Road. And as you saw in the photo earlier, which is this photo here, they've currently got quite a low boundary, and there was concern raised from the neighbours regarding security, impact from noise from the play area. So we've looked at the boundary and we've added a condition that would achieve an acoustic fence that runs along the boundary as well as some hedge planting, which will help to reduce any security concerns and the impact of noise from this play area being adjacent to the neighbour. The other neighbour affected would be this property here to the south of Clive Road, and they're closest to the flat block. So there's a distance of 21 metres from the side elevation of the flat block to the side elevation of the neighbour. The only real impact that we can see is from a window that's located in this side elevation here, which would look into their rear garden. So this is that property, this is their side elevation, and this is the first floor plan of the flat block, which on the right-hand side of this slide at the bottom you can see is a lounge window. So I was concerned that could look into the neighbouring garden, so a condition is seeking to obscure glaze that window to avoid any significant overlooking, and all of the other windows are looking side onto the property and wouldn't actually look into the private amenity space of that property. So the impact on that neighbour is considered acceptable as well. So it's not considered there's any real significant harm to the neighbours from this scheme. In terms of the tenure proposed, so the proposal is for 22% affordable housing on the site. A viability assessment has been submitted and we have had that independently reviewed. We've gone back and forth with them looking at the figures, and those are attached within the annex of the report. The conclusion of it is that the assessment shows that 22% is considered to be a reasonable provision of affordable housing on the site based on the current costs of the site, and at 22% the developer would achieve a profit of 14.8%, I think I remember reading, which falls below the recommended profit levels within the NPPF. So any increase of affordable housing would take them even lower than that, and that would be unreasonable. So in terms of the affordable housing policy, it's considered to comply with the policy because they have carried out the viability assessment, which we consider to be acceptable and reasonable. So in terms of the actual provision, they're proposing 31 units of affordable housing, which is broken up as 65% affordable rent, 32% first homes, and 3% shared ownership. On this plan here, you can see the affordable rent, which we're always quite keen to see spread around the site, is the yellow, so it's the bottom left, the flat block in this location here, and you can see some units along the north of the site here as well. Then the first homes are the purple, which again are in this location and further down here, and then there's one shared ownership along the south here. So it is felt that the units are split around the site, and in terms of the tenure, that's considered to be acceptable, and the percentage as well. In terms of the impact on highways, so as you saw from the photos earlier, utilising the existing access onto Canterbury Road West, this just shows the tracking within the site, which is achievable. The applicants confirmed that all of the roads within the scheme will be provided to adoptable standards, and tracking is provided for the 30-metre long waste vehicle, which would be able to turn within the site. In terms of the impact from the actual development, because it's to the north of the village and Canterbury Road West has been downgraded. There's less impact on that road, and there's capacity at all of the junctions that come off Canterbury Road West to serve these additional units. As mentioned, that was the link road was the emergency road being provided here would be conditioned to make sure it's only used as an emergency road, and therefore vehicles wouldn't be able to go actually directly into the centre of the village. So everything coming out from the north of the site is likely to either go west or east out of the village. So there shouldn't be any real impact on the actual centre of the village itself. The proposal includes 288 parking spaces and 47 visitor parking spaces, which KCC consider acceptable. And a travel plan has been submitted as well, with ways in which to improve sustainable transport through the scheme, which has been conditioned and includes a monitoring fee for that into the future as well. In terms of the public right-of-way then, so the existing public right-of-way runs along the western boundary of the site. So whilst I've showed you photos of the cycle and pedestrian link on the eastern side, that's just an additional pedestrian link, but the formal public right-of-way runs along the western boundary, adjacent to the northern development, and then along the western boundary of the site, and then through the actual application site itself onto the southern boundary where the public right-of-way continues. So through the application to the north, we secured a financial contribution towards the improvement of a footpath link that would help to link the site to Parkway. We have that money that's been provided, and KCC Public Rights of Way have looked at the costings again based on current costs, and taken away that contribution that we've already secured from the development above. There's a requirement for only 4,162. So that's been secured and agreed by the applicant through this application. So what that would result in is money to resurface the existing public right-of-way that runs from Canterbury Road West along the western boundary up to the application site, and then through the application site the applicant is proposing to widen and resurface the public right-of-way until it reaches the southern public right-of-way, and then this would allow people to continue walking around to Parkway Station, and then through the Cottington Road North application we secured another financial contribution, which was to provide a footpath link from that site up to Parkway Station. So what that will result in is a full pedestrian link from Canterbury Road West all the way through to Cottington Road. So whilst there have been concerns raised by Cliffs End Parish Council and who are very keen to see improvements to Foes Hill, which is completely reasonable because it is dangerous. I mean, I walked along it myself just to walk around the site, and there's a real pinch point there as you go across the railway where you can only get one car and you can only really get one pedestrian really like walking along next to it. So I can understand the concerns of the village in terms of that being an issue, but it's difficult for us to really secure anything here because the land isn't owned by the applicant. KCC haven't raised it as a concern either. So in some instances where the land isn't owned by the applicant and also the land isn't owned by KCC, they can look to try and secure the land, but there has to be a reason for it. And in this case, KCC haven't raised this as a safety issue. They've not raised it as a concern, so we couldn't look to take the land without there being a justification for it. The other concern with that as well is that even if you were to secure a footpath link that extended from the south, along the south, below the boundary of below the station, the railway line, north of the railway line, there's no footpath at all along Foes Lane, running all the way from the railway up to Canterbury Road West. So even if you were to secure it there, you still wouldn't have a footpath link that extends up to the north of the village. Whereas through this proposal, we would have a resurfaced area that would be able to serve wheelchairs and buggies and everything else that's needed all the way from the north to the south. So this is a much safer way of achieving it, and we can achieve it through this site. So it would then allow people to go down to Cottington Road, and then from Cottington Road through the new housing schemes there's then another pedestrian link through a new footpath provision that will allow a complete provision through to the centre of the village. So it's considered that is acceptable to improve public safety for pedestrians and cyclists as well. In terms of the railway, Network Rail have requested a financial contribution towards improvements at the station to try and encourage people to use the station. So the proposal they've put forward is for shelters for the ticket machines, which is £9,000, which the applicant has agreed to as well. So that would provide shelters for the 2 ticket machines in the station. In terms of other costs that have been raised, so again, the Cliffsend Parish Council have put a request in for financial contributions, which included the provision of the footpath and looking to try and seek financial contributions towards the recreation area and sports provision. For us to secure the contributions, it has to be reasonable and it has to be justified. And through the actual application site itself, they are proposing open spaces. So it's expected that any future residents within the scheme would actually be using these existing spaces rather than using the existing spaces within the village. So we have to there has to be a harm for us to mitigate in order for us to secure the financial contributions. So for the actual recreational space and sports provision, it's not considered justified because they are providing sports provision through their scheme, which would actually serve residents of the village as well, and then the recreational space to the south here and the informal space here, which again would serve the residents, which is unlikely to result in them needing to use the existing facilities. So the only justification we could find is to the actual village hall. So Clifton Parish Council have raised concerns with the fact that there's a need for improvements to the village hall. And the project they've identified is the provision of a disabled toilet within the hall. We don't have any details of the costing, but it's not clear whether it's a reconfiguration of the space, but we've taken it to be that rather than any actual extension of the hall. And the applicant has offered £10,000 to carry out those works to the hall. So that has been offered and would be secured through the legal agreement to as a benefit to the village. So in terms of just other points, biodiversity, there's no real habitats that were identified within the site in terms of like protected species at all. So it was just really nesting birds was the real issue that was identified. Wintering surveys were carried out, and it showed that the golden plover, which is one of the birds that use the special protection area, aren't likely to have used the site. From all the surveys they've carried out, they don't use the site, so it's not considered there be an impact on functionally linked land within the special protection area. Through the application, they are proposing new tree planting and hedge planting, and then there's lots of wildflower provision as well within the open space to the left here, as well as like the orchards and other things. So there is some biodiversity enhancements through the scheme, which would help to achieve the habitats for the nesting birds. So overall, there is some harm because the fact it's an unallocated site within the village, but it is considered to be sort of a sustainable location in terms of its proximity to the railway. The fact that with the railway, within 5 minutes you can be within Ramsgate, because I've looking at the times, you can get to Ramsgate in 5 minutes, and then from there there's lots of easy access to the health centre, which I believe from looking at this site would fall within the catchment of the health centre, so actually you could get there quite quickly and use that facility. The facility within the village that I've mentioned, and the fact that Manson Green's going ahead, we consider that all of those things make this appear quite a sustainable site. And in terms of the actual location, it is quite a natural expansion of the village, where it's not extending beyond the existing western boundary of existing development. And in terms of the impact on landscape character area, with the backdrop of existing development and all the landscaping that exists along the southern boundary, it's considered that will help to reduce any real impact. So whilst there is the visual impact harm, obviously the benefit is that the fact we are achieving 141 units. It started off as 145, but it has dropped to 141 in order to achieve the spacing that we were looking for along that southern boundary. So it's now 141 units, and of that we are getting 22% affordable housing. So there are social and economic benefits from that provision. And when weighing those against the harm, it's considered that the benefits, in our view, on balance, do outweigh the harm. So the application is recommended to be deferred and delegated for approval, subject to the receipt of the legal agreement, which will secure all financial contributions as set out within the report, including the contributions to the hall and the railway and the public right-of-way, plus everything else requested by KCC and the CCG and the 22% affordable housing, and subject to the safeguarding conditions and the adoption of the shadow appropriate assessment in Annex 5. Thank you.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
Thank you. First speaking, I have Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the detailed report. I believe that we need sustainable growth, and I feel that a good range of dwellings and green spaces is being proposed, and that the proposed development is well planned. However, considering that this site is not allocated in the local plan, I find it quite disappointing that the affordable housing percentage has been dropped to 22%. I wonder whether any adaptations could be made so that this could be raised. I also wonder whether a site visit may help us to appreciate the potential traffic issues raised by our speakers tonight. I don't believe that the applicant not owning the land is justifiable reason to compromise the safety of our residents. Thank you.
Sorry, just to come back on the 22% point, because I know this is an issue that obviously members are very aware of. So we have gone back a couple of times. Obviously, all the reports are in the annex where our consultants have raised issues. It's then gone back. We've had a revised assessment appraisal done, and then it's come back in with another report being looked at. The issue on the site fundamentally is about really it's the cost of developing the site just generally in terms of building the houses, and those costs have been looked at and assessed. Add in then the gross development value of the site in terms of what you'd actually get for those houses when they sell, and there has been lots of back and forth about what values you take, and looking at the upper range, which is what obviously we are looking to do. The issue though when you look at the site is that even to get 22%, the developer profit on that basis is the 14.8. Now, the National Planning Policy Practice Guidance notes basically say you can look at a range between 15% and 20% developer profit. Now, with the Shondane Road application, which obviously went to a public inquiry, their big argument in that was about the fact that the developer had put forward 17.5%, so the midpoint between that guidance. And in that instance, the inspectorate, after taking evidence, considered that to be reasonable because it's within that sort of span. And in this instance, obviously, they actually provide, their appraisal shows less profit than that. So in terms of the idea of potentially getting more affordable housing, what that would effectively do is it would start eroding, or it would erode, the other contributions that obviously they've put to provide. So there is the trade-off that would happen would effectively be to lose that side of things. Just to clarify this point with regards to the Folds Hill point, I understand members' concerns, and obviously Emma's already outlined the concerns on that bit of that stretch of land. In terms of, for example, a Grampian condition requiring a footpath thing to put in, there's no reasonable prospect of that happening at all. It's under private ownership. In terms of the council actually compulsory purchasing that land, that's entirely unreasonable given that highways don't even object, saying that there's a significant and demonstrable impact on the movement north to south, especially given the fact that there's a footpath route that has been secured throughout previous applications on allocated sites in Cliffs End, and obviously that's secured through this application in terms of that public right-of-way work on the west. So it would be it would, in our view, be it wouldn't be a reason for refusal that we would in any way be able to sustain in terms of a highway objection on pedestrian safety without the support of the Highway Authority. So that's why obviously what's been looked at is trying to get the best possible link through other means, which is obviously what we consider that's occurred.
Thank you. Councillor Alban.
Thank you, Chair. Just to go back on Councillor Bayford's point, I think it is a nice development. It's laid out very, very, very well, but for me it's in the wrong place. And the reason I say that is that the report actually says that the site forms a natural expansion of the village. Well, we've already had one extension of the village, and now we've got an extension on the extension in front of us this evening. I have to say that we have enough land allocated within the local plan for development, and now we're asked to accept a piece of land that's not within the local plan to put 141 houses or houses and flats on. I think that you've already covered the point about the 22% affordable housing. Me included, I don't think members quite understand how that's arrived at, because whatever the equation is that is used to determine that, and from what I've just heard Mr Livingston say, effectively it's about cost and it's about profitability, not about need. So that's slightly annoying, as Councillor Bayford has already said. It's quite clear as well within the conclusion of the officer's report, as it states the land is not allocated and lies outside the urban confines within a landscape character area. The proposal will result in the loss of this area as agricultural land, and as such there will be a loss of best and most versatile land. For me, that in itself, as not being part of the local plan, is a reason to refuse it. So that they are my views, Chair, and I don't think I can support this application. Thank you.
So just to confirm, in terms of the Councillor Orban, in terms of the allocations in the local plan, you're absolutely right. Obviously, it's not an allocated site. So when I was outlining earlier with regards to at the top of the meeting, we are, as a local authority, in that paragraph 11 of the MPPF world, where the harm has to be demonstrated to outweigh the benefits that are inherent in the MPPF in that paragraph of providing housing. And because of the housing delivery test and where we are still in that presumption. You know, we're not in a position where we can just refuse applications because they're not on allocated housing sites, so when they're outside the urban confines. In terms of your point about loss of agricultural land, that is a harm, as you identify. It has been shown through previous appeal decisions, and the one that members will be familiar with is the application that was in Moncton for 49 houses, where that was not an allocated housing site. It was refused by members twice. The first time it was refused on loss of agricultural land, and in that instance it was best and most versatile, and it was the inspector determined that the provision of 49 houses, when there was an identified need because of the MPPF, that it outweighed the harm to the loss of the agricultural land. So we are taking that into account when we're balancing it up, and obviously now we've made the recommendation on that basis, but I just wanted to draw members' attention to that particular appeal decision and how sometimes the inspector can look at it. Now, this is a larger amount of agricultural land than in that instance, but at the same time the flip of that is it's a larger amount of houses provided as well, so just so that members take that into account.
Can I just check, when you was speaking at the beginning of the meeting, you gave a figure of 71% in the relevant period. Under the old system of 5-year housing supply, we were way off. How does the new figures fit in? I think it would help to know. You talked about the tilted balance, and also, whilst I'm at it, given the number of developments that are in line, presumably we've got a reasonable timescale of when those are likely to be completed, those that are already under construction. How will they affect the figures?
So in terms of the housing delivery test, the housing delivery test takes 3 years worth of data and basically looks at it over those 3 years to work out on the overall requirement over those years that's outlined in the local plan, how many houses have been completed in that time period. Now, the statistics themselves, which came out today, outline, as I say, 71% is where our percentage is of how many have been completed in that 3-year period and how many were required under our plan to be delivered in that 3-year period. Now, that requirement changes during the course of the plan period, and members will recall me mentioning this in the training, that it goes up to 1,200 a year in that 2021-2022 year, which is the last year of those 3 years that the current statistics are on the basis of. Now, because of the government taking into account the impact that coronavirus had on the development industry, that requirement overall has been reduced, but we're still at 71%. Now, as time goes on, so say we look at the next year's worth, so the 2023 housing delivery test, we've got more years then that are required for us to provide 1,200 houses. And because of the exemption, or sorry, the reduction that occurs from that coronavirus period, the statistics do technically get worse. However, delivery has increased over the last few years, but not to the extent that we are providing 1,200 houses a year. So the statistics from October 2022 to October 2023 that I'm aware of put the delivery at about 632, I believe it is, houses. So it is unlikely that we are going to, in the housing delivery test going forward, achieve the 75% which is required for us to be able to say paragraph 11 does not apply to us. So it does mean that we are in the situation where we have to take account of that the most important policies of the local plan, according to the NPPF, are considered to be out of date by virtue of paragraph 11. And that does mean that clause that I read out at the start, which is that actually applications for housing should be approved unless there is demonstrable harm that outweighs those identified and clear benefits. So members are very familiar with that test because as you've all lived in this world for a while now.
Thank you. Councillor Matterface next, please.
Thank you. We've heard an awful lot about the railway station, but could I ask Mrs Fibbins if you could bring up the overall map with Canterbury Road West on the top and Cliffs End down at the bottom, please? Your overall view. Yeah. Could you tell me where the nearest bus stop to this development is? Bearing in mind, 80% of all journeys on public transport are by bus.
It is actually in Canterbury Road West, right by the entrance to the site.
How often? Is that the number 9 bus that goes to Moncton?
I did look at the bus timetable. I mean, from what I looked at, it looked like there were buses every half an hour, but I know there's been some comments from the parish that there's been some changes to that. I don't know what the current situation is.
Trust me, there have been a lot of changes to buses in Thanet. The number 9, which used to go to Canterbury and took people to Canterbury Hospital, among other things, now runs less than once an hour and terminates in Moncton. It's not really much use if you want to get anywhere else. Also, I'd like to ask, you pointed out Manston Green, there'd be a primary school there, but how are people going to get from this development to that primary school when there is no pavement down? There's no proper pavement down Canterbury Road West, is there? I think I have to want people to walk along a really busy road to get to school.
There is a pavement that runs all the way up to the roundabout, so all the way along from here up to the roundabout. Then it does stop at the moment, to be fair. It does currently stop, but through the Manston Green application, there would be a continuation of the footpath. So that's what I'm saying. You can't necessarily give it, I suppose, huge weight at the moment, but it is an extant scheme that's currently under construction. So the expectation is that there would be a footpath connection that would lead to a primary school in the future.
My next question is, I'm going to ask, how far would it be for people to walk to that school from this development if they haven't got their own?
I have included some estimates in the report. It's rough because the footpath doesn't exist at the moment, but What did I? Sorry, hang on one minute. Yeah, so in the report, I've said roughly it would be 20 to 25 minute walk, and a 5 to 10 minute bike ride from the edge of the village.
A 20-minute, 25-minute walk for a mum to walk small children to, it would take a lot longer. 20 minutes is approximately, if you fit, a mile. So it's over a mile to the proposed school. Yep.
We're just going to try and work that out. But yes, I know the 20-minute mile as well.
There's no way anybody sensible is going to cycle that.
Okay, while we're doing that, I've got Councillor Garner next, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I share the concerns raised by Councillors Bayford and Auburn about the loss of agricultural land, which is unallocated for housing in the local plan, and doesn't deliver the 30% affordable homes as per the policy in our local plan. And I did have a bit of time on my hands today, and I did start wading through the viability assessment reports, of which there are 2, and the reviews of those. But I obviously found them very difficult to make head or tail of and sense. But I just came to the conclusion, actually, if we need harms that are outweighed by benefits, then that is a harm, and I don't see the benefit. If this was an allocated area of land in the local plan, like the Shotton Road one was, which those of us who were here at the time will remember, we came back 3 times, having lots of arguments, and in the end decided that actually that was a harm that outweighed the benefit, that it wasn't delivering the affordable housing. We did refuse, and yes, it went to appeal and got overturned, but in this case this isn't land that's allocated for housing. One thing that I've read in the report was the assessment from the strategic housing officer, which I thought was quite illuminating. And I don't remember seeing many reports from the strategic housing sorry, I've got the. I'm not talking about the strategic planning manager. I beg your pardon. I had it open at the wrong time. We don't see many submissions from the strategic planning manager, and he's basically saying that he has concerns with sustainability of housing development in Cliffs End, especially on non-allocated sites. And he's also saying these were concerns that were expressed during the local plan review, leading up to when the local plan was adopted. And he's pointed out a couple of sections from the inspector's report into the local plan about Cliffs End, saying that, sort of backing up his assessment, that this isn't necessarily a sustainable area for housing development. And he says any assessment of Cliffs End as a sustainable settlement that could support greater levels of housing will take place through the local plan review update process, which some of us are part of, and that needs to be done considered alongside a comprehensive review and of appropriate range of services to be delivered alongside any housing. That needs to be, in my view, I think that needs to be done before we consider large developments like this on allocated land that is also prime agricultural land. So that's where I'm coming from. I do want to just add something else based on the really quite interesting submission from Network Rail, which I found quite well, they've got some nerve to put it in, I thought. They're basically, they said their submission focuses on recently opened Thanet Parkway, which I think at the last estimate cost 45 million plus to develop. And I'm not here to argue about that, that's been done. But they're saying at present customer facilities at the station are rather basic, and as such would benefit from improvements, which is I think why they've asked for funding for an extra £9,000, to put a couple of shelters in. I don't know why they couldn't have spent 45 million £9,000. It does seem ridiculous. I mean, that is sort of getting away from my main points, which I think are, this is an unsustainable development, and so unless someone else here who's going to support it can persuade me otherwise, then I won't be supporting.
Thank you. Councillor Keane next, please.
Thank you. Well, I like the community garden and orchard part of it, but I mean, I won't go over all the points other people have already raised, but it is unallocated. I can't really see how it's a natural expansion of the village. I think it'll have a huge impact on the village as it is and its character. And I also think that, you know, developments are supposed to conserve and enhance the character, and I can't see that this does. I'm also worried, I know you'll say I can only consider what we've got before us, but where we've got that sort of almost triangular bit of green space, is it going to just mean that the fields behind that are going to be developed? Because otherwise I can't see why that would have been put in. There's other areas of green in the development, but I know you're going to say I can't consider that. Yet again, we have not the 30% of social housing, and I know, you know, I've listened to your explanation, but I have yet to see a development come forward with 30% of the affordable housing, so I just think it's very disappointing. But for all those reasons, I won't be supporting this.
Thanks. Yeah, just to confirm, obviously, that as you identify, Councillor Keane, the application has to be considered its own merits in terms of any potential for future expansion. Obviously, we have published as part of the local plan review the proposed allocations that have been put forward, which does include the rest of the land in that sort of section. But indeed, the application itself has to be considered on its own. Just to come back on the last couple of points about SP23. So SP23 is the affordable housing policy. It doesn't delineate allocated or unallocated. So it's just any development for 10 or more units. And if effectively a viability assessment has demonstrated that the development would be unviable when meeting those requirements, the policy allows for them to be reduced. And that is the fundamental consideration which came down in the appeal, because in that argument it was even though it's been demonstrated, so the appeal on Shotton Road this is, even though it had been demonstrated that it wasn't viable to provide more, the harm was so great that it outweighed the benefit. In that instance, that was not considered to be a reason to reject the application by the inspector, and so that is why, obviously, to your point about 30% affordable housing, I actually think, given the recent number of schemes that have come before the committee, I do think actually a lot of them are providing 30%. There are some that it's more difficult to provide, and in the instances of some instances, and the Shotton Road is actually a good example, because even though the appeal allowed for 15%, because of the way that funding works, you can actually get funding from Homes England to provide over and above what's secured in a Section 106, and that development itself, that Shotton Road development, is bringing forward 66%. So it does happen. Obviously, we made mention of the fact of the development to the north and also the development in Porthole Lane, which is more than the 30%, but this development has justified 22%. There would be no case to answer appeal in our view, and it would be an untenable reason for refusal on that point.
Thank you. I have Councillor Towning next, please.
Thank you, Chair. going on from where Councillor Albin talked about the actual allocation of social housing and the equation, well, obviously there's no equation. It's a trade-off. You know, you give me this and I'll give you that and we go forward. So, you know, it doesn't make a lot of sense. The more important aspect of it is that we're talking about 144 houses or properties. And of those properties, if we look at it on the basis that there'll be 1 car per household, or you say 1.5 cars per household, you're talking about over 200 cars coming into an area that already has a very limited traffic track, a single track, isn't that correct, I was told? So that would affect not just, you know, you're talking about harm. The harm would be increasing the traffic, increasing the pollution, increasing the the damage to the environment. So there is a serious harm here. So I mean, I can't honestly believe that we can go ahead with a development that doesn't have a right to be developed on that land because it doesn't form part of the land that has been allocated for housing. So I would not support this application.
Thank you. I do have one extra question of my own that no one's asked yet. Street lighting on the paths, and there have been various talks of paths. We've been having a lot of talk recently about lighting from the point of view of protection of violence against women and girls. What are the proposals for street lighting?
So in terms of street lighting, there's no details at the moment of street lighting, but there's a condition for details to come in for the street lighting. That is mainly to do with the impact on biodiversity from any bats, so usually we put that condition on for that, but it would also look at general street lighting within the development. In terms of the air quality comment, just coming back on that, so they haven't needed to do an air quality assessment through the application because it's not being considered that there's been a need for it, but they would have to do a mitigation assessment and look at the harm created through the vehicle movements and use the damage cost result from that to put money back into the development in terms of landscaping and sustainable benefits such as the footpath links to try and encourage people to use sustainable transport and not use vehicles. So that would be, again, that's conditioned to come in, but the contribution towards the network rail is part of that as well, trying to, again, encourage people to use the railway. And in terms of the vehicle movements that you've just mentioned, in terms of the impact on the highway, because of the fact that road has been downgraded, it's not actually very well used road anymore because lots of people use the bypass that goes around. So in terms of vehicle movements, KCC haven't raised any impact on the vehicle movements that will go on to Canterbury Road West because the junctions have adequate capacity to deal with this traffic from the development.
And just Councillor Masfos, to come back on your question about the distance. Sorry, we haven't forgotten. It's looking at it using Google. It's a mile. 23 minutes is what's estimated for walking.
That's quite. I found a bit. I've just been reading through. It says there'll be provision on the application site for buses to stop. That will be good. Discussions will need to be held with KCC Public Transport and the bus provider to understand the viability and whether any financial contribution is required. This will require access to be suitably wide enough, 6.75 metres, to accommodate buses. But we haven't heard anything in Mrs. Fibbins' presentation about any buses. And I mean, at the moment, the only bus is the 9, which is a very limited service. So this is a transport assessment. We're trying to encourage people not to use their car, but they can't stop using their car if they've got no alternative, assuming they've even got one. If you're going to have a lot of elderly people in these bungalows, and the chance that they may not have a car.
Are you talking about the comment from highways or? Sorry, I don't have numbers on my page, so I don't know which page you're looking at.
Sorry, this is all under the transport and assessment and everything. Yeah. I mean, there's no mention of any buses.
I mean, I think there was a mention about whether buses could come in to the development, and obviously that'll be something that Stagecoach would have to, well, I presume other companies maybe, I don't know, would have to look at for the site. But in terms of the proximity of the bus stop to the development, because it is literally sort of to the north by the access, we wouldn't necessarily be saying they have to come into the site, because it's still, everybody within the site would be walking distance of the bus stop. So that wouldn't necessarily be an issue. And I think it might have also been mentioned by the by Network Rail about a bus link as well. But again, it'd probably be quicker to walk there than get the bus, to be honest, from here all the way around to Parkway. So.
Okay, so I don't have any more speakers, which means that we will now put the motion for the officer's recommendation for deferral and delegate to the vote. Those in favour? And those against? So the motion is lost, which means we need to have a new motion.
I would suggest that it may be prudent for a couple of members to approach the bench with a short adjournment to have a discussion before a new motion is put to committee.
That sounds sensible. That's what we'll do. Who wants to contribute? Councillor Alban, Councillor Keane, Councillor Garner?
Do you want to give people a few
Yeah.
moments to get started?
Yes, if anyone wants to take a comfort break at this point, we will be going into a comfort break at the end of this debate anyway. Okay, thank you, members. We do have an alternative proposal. Councillor Garner, would you like to invite Mr Livingstone?
Yes, I would like to invite Mr Livingstone to read it out, please.
Okay, so the motion that be proposed would be to refuse the application on the basis of 4 reasons for refusal. First one is that the proposal, by virtue of its location and form, would result in the loss of countryside and harm to the characteristics of the landscape character area and the rural character of the village, where the need for and the impact of the development has not been demonstrated to outweigh the need to protect Thanet's landscape character and local distinctiveness, with the unsustainable nature of development in this location and visual harm resulting from the additional built form not sufficiently outweighed by economic, social and environmental benefits, contrary to policies SP01, SP24, SP26 and QDO2 of the local plan, and paragraphs 8, 135 and 138 of the MPPF. The second reason would be that the proposed development would result in the irreversible loss of best and most versatile agricultural land, contrary to policy E16 and paragraph 180 of the MPPF, with the proposal failing to demonstrate that the benefits of the proposal would outweigh the harm arising from the loss of agricultural land. And then the third and fourth reason are technical reasons for refusal, because as members will be aware, there is currently at this point in time no legal agreement for actually securing the contributions for affordable the amount of affordable housing on site and the contributions for development. So it would state that the third reason would be the applicant has failed to enter into a legal agreement to secure affordable housing and the delivery of the necessary planning obligations required in order to mitigate the impacts of the proposed development on local infrastructure and make the development acceptable in all other respects. The application is therefore contrary to policies SP23 and SP41 of the local plan and the MPPF, and then that the proposed development would result in the increased recreational pressure on the Thanet Special Protection Area and the triple SI, and in the absence of an acceptable form of mitigation to relieve the pressure, the proposed development would be contrary to policy SP29 of the local plan and paragraphs 180 and 181 of the MPPF and the Habitat Regs.
Thank you. Councillor Garner, you're proposing that?
Yes, thank
and
you.
Can I have a
am.
second to Councillor Keane? Does anyone want to ask any questions or debate that further, or shall we go straight to the vote on that one? So straight to the vote. Those in favour? And those against? Abstentions? Thank you. So that is now carried.
Thank you. Can I just ask? Sorry, just to be clear. So can you tell me what I was trying to count what the numbers were. That was all.
We don't normally announce the numbers in this committee. Sorry, we've had that discussion before, and that was the answer from Dem Services. So thank you. I will now take a 5-minute formal break. I know people have taken advantage of the discussion period. Well, you might have, apart from me and a few others, not everyone, but we will take a 5-minute adjournment. Thank you. We have 2 more discussions still to come. Right, I think we're all back in the room now. If we can reconvene. Okay. All right, thank you everyone. We'll now continue on with agenda item 3B, the garage block at the rear of 161 to 213 Clements Road, Ramsgate. Public speaking in favour of the application is Mr Rhys Lemon. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. I will speak in support. I will be very brief. I'm very aware that it's a long committee tonight, and you're stuck with me for the next item as well, so apologies in advance. Someone mentioned earlier this evening, it's always quite tricky to speak in support of something that's already been comprehensively assessed and written about already. And I will be super duper brief just on that basis, really. But I just wanted to reinforce the kind of the wider overarching ambition of this item and the next one. The scheme before you draws on a wider housing delivery strategy with TDC as the applicant, who will also be delivering this scheme. This is a scheme based around 9 units here, but 49 total units across the district as part of a affordable housing delivery strategy. The first one targeting net zero for operational carbon emissions at that. This scheme in particular breathed new life, or would breathe new life, into an underutilised part of the existing site, making full use of identified brownfield land within urban confines, which, as we know already, is in clear compliance with overarching planning policies for the supply of new housing. The new homes delivered here would be let via the council's housing register and retained as council housing stock. They'd be let at affordable rent in perpetuity, subject, of course, to any future right to buy applications that may or may not come in. Interestingly, this is a scheme, I know we've just spoken on the previous application about affordable housing and the 30%. This is a 100% affordable housing scheme, which I'm hopeful that you'll agree is a significant benefit of the proposal. And likewise, in exceedance of other policy requirements, 8 of these dwellings would be M42 compliant, accessible and adaptable, with the other being M43 wheelchair accessible. I won't talk too much around matters of design and appearance. I think your officers have dealt really well with that in the report itself. But I would, again, just emphasise that this application comes forward following pre-app in autumn of last year, and quite an extensive design evolution in the period since the submission back in the autumn time of this year. And great care has been taken to minimise any sense of overlooking, overbearing nature and so on. And we really have worked quite hard with your officers and technical comments that have come in to bring forward something that is both deliverable but also something that we feel is appropriate in this location. There are no outstanding technical objections on this application, whether that's from highways, drainage, ecology, fire and rescue, environmental health and so on. You'll have read in the report that there were some questions raised from the council's tree officer. We have worked with officers to revisit elements of the proposal, and we are now retaining the mature sycamore tree that was the subject of that query. And we do agree, and the applicant does agree to a series of related conditions to ensure that the protection of that tree over time. Overall, your officer's report makes a really clear recommendation in support of the scheme, and on behalf of the applicant, we do agree with that, and we encourage you to support that. We likewise support all of the proposed conditions that have been put forward. And I will leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will now hand over to the Planning Applications Manager to outline the report.
Thank you, Chair. So the application is for the erection of a 3-storey building containing 9 flats. That's 4 1-bed and 5 2-bed. Main issues are principal development, impact on character appearance of the area, impact on living conditions and impact on highways. So the development would occur following the demolition of some stores at the rear of a number of the buildings on Clements Road. So we've got a car parking area that you can see in the middle of the picture. So to the north of the site, you've got it's the Royal Harbour Academy at this site here, where the field is in the green wedge between Broadstairs and Ramsgate. This is an isometric view from Google, just showing that area to the rear where the proposal would be sited. You can see the bank of trees along the back of the site. So this is a view looking into the vehicular access into the site with the trees in the back. The sycamore tree that's already been mentioned is on the left-hand side here, so that's proposed to be retained. The landscaping across the back is proposed to be removed with replacement landscaping behind. So we've entered the site now and we've turned to the right, so you can see the stores, the majority of which are going to be demolished as part of the proposal. And you can see that the the dwellings in the three-storey building that wrap around the corner to create the courtyard have walkways facing inside with their main entrance doors at the front, with kitchen windows facing into the courtyard. The main habitable room windows of the bedrooms and living areas are either facing the road or the other way, so they don't face into the site. So this is a view looking back towards that block that I was just talking about, and you can see the stores at the front and the existing parking areas in the foreground. Then this is looking again to that block there's a footpath that runs out and down an alleyway to the left-hand side to the other units around the side, but this is the parking area and this is the location of the proposed development. So this is the detail of that landscaping at the rear. And this is in the back corner where that footpath is, looking back towards the entrance to the site. And then this is looking, just turn to the left, just looking again, that point about the windows that are serving the rooms that face into that courtyard. And then again with that existing part of the buildings. And then this is looking back the other way, so you've got habitable room windows that are facing into the courtyard on the back of this property. Again, you can see the sycamore tree at the back there, and then the landscaping on the right-hand side. And then this is that mention of that footpath where we were just standing. And then this is inside that courtyard with the stores present. So this is the site location plan. You can see that there's an area that's outside of the sort of site as we were looking at on the photos. It's not proposed there's any development in that area. That's the green wedge. That's just where the replacement landscaping is proposed to go. So this is the existing site layout plan. So you can see that the parking spaces at the rear that we were just seeing the photos of, the stores there, and the drying space in the middle. So the development would be sited in the parking space that was shown. The existing parking in and around the area, there are 33 spaces across the whole of the estate at the moment. The development would end up having 38 spaces, so the parking that has at the moment would be built upon is being re-provided in certain locations in and around where there is existing parking, and then there's a new parking stretch that's being provided with a new access road that basically goes where those stores were. So you can see the dotted lines of the stores that are there at the moment. There are 30 stores at the moment, 22 of them are being demolished to create the access route, and then you've got a smaller community garden that's being created in the centre of the site. You have a bin storage area in the sort of, I'm going to say the top corner in this instance is sort of the north of the site if we had put this in the compass orientation. So just looking at it in a bit more detail, this is the existing, and then you've got the proposed here. So again, just showing a bit more detail of the demolition of the stores, the garden at the front. The main entrance to the flats is facing into that community garden. You have, if I go to the the stores, just showing the red ones to be demolished. So you've got 5 on one side and 3 on the other side. In terms of the front elevation of the development, so what's been proposed is a flat roof building, which is basically buff brick. You can see on this elevation that you've got various recessed panels and projecting panels that are proposed. You've got side elevations which similarly have panels that are basically showing different articulation. So it's not just a box. It's got architectural detailing that's in it as well. As already mentioned, the aim of this development is to be net zero in terms of carbon. There is a condition, obviously, which is put on all housing developments, which requires adherence to an equivalent to Code Level 4. This would exceed that requirement, but that's what the policy framework allows us to require at this point in time. This is the rear elevation, so this is the elevation that obviously has most of the windows in it that face it out onto the green wedge. Then just looking at that floor plan, so internally on ground floor you have a lift so that all of the units are accessible via a lift as well as a staircase. So you have the unit on the left hand side there, that's being proposed as a wheelchair accessible home. All of the other units are being provided as adaptable accessible homes that could be adapted in the future to wheelchair homes depending on residents' needs in due course. So then looking then at the first floor, so it mirrors the layout of the ground floor, and then the second floor, which is there, and then there's the roof there. So in terms of the relationship with neighbouring properties, the building has been sited to maximise the distance to the units at the front that you can see at the bottom of the slide there. So you're looking at an 18-metre distance from building to building. As I mentioned, the windows that are actually facing into the site at the moment are not the primary habitable room windows of those properties, so we do consider that there wouldn't be significant overlooking created from the new windows looking into the existing residence or looking towards the existing residence. Similarly, with the relationship with the properties to the right hand side, there's a greater distance at that point to the neighbours. And in terms of the orientation, I mentioned those buildings that actually have habitable room windows that face into the courtyard, which is on the left hand side of the drawing. You can see that the orientation, or sorry, the siting of that building at the back is trying to basically avoid any direct impact to result in a sense of enclosure to those windows. And we do think the development has successfully achieved that point. All of the units are according with nationally described space standards, and as I mentioned, obviously, are being provided to an adaptable accessible requirement. So just to give you an idea of the section through the building, so you've got a parapet which in terms of the actual design for the flat roof. The floor to ceiling heights you're looking at on this building are about 2.5 metres, so they're above the required standard. What that does though create is a situation where the building at the rear, which is proposed, is slightly higher than the buildings around it. So one of the things that we've been looking at is how does that sit within the context of the landscape. So this is a section showing the drying area and the two, so basically we are standing on Clements Road, but we don't have the building in front of us, and you've got those two blocks either side. So obviously the development would be higher than the developments either side, but because of the nature of the openness behind that development with regards to the green wedge, which obviously cannot be developed, we don't consider that there is harm from the development being to the rear and being higher. This is a view from the green wedge, so unless you're on the school field, you're not actually going to see this view, but obviously it's been sited again predominantly to avoid the impact on the neighbouring properties around there. And then this is the side view, so Clements Road is there on the right hand side, and you can see again that change in height. You're looking at probably just a little bit, probably around about a metre above the ridge height of the existing buildings. We don't consider that the design of the flat roof building particularly conflicts with the buildings around it. Obviously the buildings around it have been built in a particular way at a particular time. We do consider that the merits of the scheme being brought forward, including the energy efficiency of the building and the design that is acceptable in terms of the character of the area. And then, sorry, the last section then showing Clements Road is now on your left, and again showing the relationship. But as you see, even though it looks like it blocks that side of things, obviously the site plan shows that actually you're not having a direct impact on that neighbour to warrant refusal. There are obviously visualisations that, I say obviously, there are visualisations that have been provided. Obviously these are for illustrative purposes, and just the main reason that I'm showing them members to you is there is quite a rigorous landscaping scheme that has been put in to try and actually improve the visual amenities of that central courtyard area, including planting of trees, hedgerows, as well as boundary treatments as well, but also the recessed windows there and the actual panels themselves, because I think if you look at a flat elevation, I think you'd be right to be potentially concerned, but in terms of actually what it will look like because of how it's been designed, it will show, due regard to an actual architectural interest, certainly to the benefit of the area. And then this is another view, just a perspective inside the development, just showing again the detail that's provided. So just in terms of the tree survey, as I mentioned, there is going to be the loss of trees as part of this development. This is a balanced point in terms of you losing existing trees. They are category C trees, so they aren't providing significant amenity value, or indeed they're not. they are trees that are in not necessarily of a particular age to warrant higher grade status, but the category B tree, which is the sycamore, will now be retained as part of the development, and that has been agreed by the applicant, and there are conditions requiring that. You can see from this plan there has been a provision of, you've got 5 trees around the back in the area that are being provided, effectively re-providing the trees that are being lost. You've also got a further tree in the back corner as well as the additional landscaping to the front. So we do think that there is certainly a benefit overall to the amount of landscaping that's being provided. And just to pick up a point with regards to the parking, KCC have looked at the transport statement that's been produced. That specifically looked at the amount of parking in the area as well as the parking on the spaces within the site and the surrounding parking around there, because you are only looking at a net increase of 5 spaces. Just to confirm, that's 5. The report actually indicates it's 6 in the paragraph, but just to confirm, it's 5 spaces. However, even though Clements Road can be a busy road, and as I'm reliably informed, can be used as a rat run, it is considered that there is parking available on Clements Road, as well as the fact that you have got, there are 5 spaces on site additional to those that are already provided, and the data that's been provided and has been agreed by KCC Highways indicates that there is capacity to avoid harm to highway safety and the free flow of traffic. Now, one point that I wish to raise is that the recommendation on this application is to defer for approval, subject to the conditions outlined in the report, but also it's for the transfer of the SAMS contribution. Now, because the council are the applicant, we can't enter into a legal agreement with ourselves. So what that means is the actual transfer into the SAMS account has to occur before we can grant permission. That is not a regular situation, but it is appropriate and has sufficient record keeping and probity, and therefore the recommendation is to approve subject to the transfer of that contribution to mitigate that and the safeguarding conditions.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
Thank you. Do I have anyone wishing to speak? Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say that I really welcome this development. 9 self-contained flats is really good to hear, and highly sustainable at that, to replace the garages that are unused at the moment. So thank you for that.
Councillor Keane.
Thank you. I also want to support this development. I think it's great, but I'm particularly pleased to see it being net zero and having the solar panels and things like that. So well done to the architects.
Councillor Rozeki.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to concur with my 2 colleagues there. Yeah, seems like a great little project, and wish them well.
Councillor Matterface.
I'll be very quick. No issue with buses there. It's a short walk to the loop. And no issue with schools. You've got Royal Harbour behind you, and you've got Dame Janet just up the main road. So, and it's a highly sustainable because you've got all those shops on the
I think that looks like it. Thank you for mentioning the rat run, because that's my that was going to be my question. In that case, we will now put the motion for the officer's recommendation for deferral to the vote. Those in favour? And I think that's everyone. Thank you. So that motion is carried. Item 3C, site of the former Dane Valley Arms in Dane Valley Road, Margate. For public speaking, I have Mr. Rees-Lemon again. 3 minutes.
Perfect, thank you, Chair. I'll be even quicker on this one because the principles are very much the same. It's very much as part of the same overall project. I just wanted to draw attention to the main point on this one being that this site is also an allocated site under policy HO1 for residential use. It's described as being purely for residential use. I really want to send to that. That's come through quite nicely in the balancing exercise of your officer's report, but I just wanted to draw attention to that under obviously the adopted plan in 2020. The site also does benefit from 2 previous planning approvals, I think 4 or 5 years ago, and subsequent to that, I think about 9 or 10 years ago, including 4 resi as part of those applications at the time, but also with supplementary mixed use elements to those. point being that, as I say, I draw attention to the 2020 plan and the allocation of this for unfettered residential land use rather than a mixed use. Notwithstanding that, the site itself has been vacant for a number of years now. It hasn't, as far as we're aware, hasn't had a community use on this. It used to, of course, used to be a public house. That hasn't operated for at least 10 years. It hasn't been there for about 5 to 7 years, and has been very much left vacant and is very much the definition of a brownfield site. And again, what we have here is a 100% affordable housing scheme to be delivered by the council for its residents against an identified housing need. The emphasis really is on implementing this and moving forward and cracking on with this. And we've worked hard with your officers, again informed by pre-app over autumn last year, I think maybe even been summer last year, to this point in time. So we have worked quite hard to get something that we can move forward with to make a genuine difference. Again, I won't kind of dive into character and appearance and things like that. That's dealt with really well in the report. We have worked quite closely on matters of overlooking and overbearing and those types of impacts, using the previous applications as reference points as to what has been approved previously, and have come up with a scheme which we think works quite well, and pleasingly your officers appear to agree with that. Again, similar to the other application, there aren't any outstanding objections to this proposal on technical grounds. And yes, on that basis, I would encourage you to support your officer's recommendation for approval subject to conditions. Thanks very much.
Thank you, and over to the Planning Applications Manager to outline the report. No, not quite, but yeah.
This is the site outlined here, so Arlington Gardens on the left and Dane Valley Road to the bottom of this slide. And this is an aerial view of the site. So you can see it's on the corner of these two roads, opposite the open space and shore start you can see in the left of the slide. And then a closer view of the site. So formerly contained the Dane Valley Arms public house on the site, which, as mentioned, closed between 2009 and 2012, so hasn't been on the site as a workable community facility for a minimum of 10 years, and then was demolished in around 2016, and since then the site has remained sort of in this condition. So these are just some photos quickly of the site. So again, this is the site behind this blue hoarding. And inside the site, you can see the current conditions. So it has been regularly cleared. It's hard surface, mainly previously developed land. And in the urban confines, you can see neighbouring the site are terrace units and semi-detached units. And then just again showing the conditions of the land. And then these are the properties in Arlington Gardens. And then in Arlington Gardens again, it's here. So there's some level changes you can see through the site with Arlington Gardens dropping down so that the south of the site is at the lowest level. And then again, just a few more photos of there. So again, we now have Dane Valley Road is on the left-hand side here. Again, Arlington Gardens in front of us. And then looking at the existing access point into the site, and then back at the front, and then just going along to the right-hand side just to show you the properties there. So these are the existing properties to the right-hand side. So you can see terrace units, and you can see the staggering pattern of development of these units. So each block set in front of the one adjacent to it. And then this is now up Arlington Gardens, so the neighbouring properties are these two pairs of semi-detached units here with the dormers at roof level, and then just looking back down the site here. So the proposal is for 17 units. It includes 4 houses and a block of flats in this location here, with a new vehicular access running from Dane Valley Road to create some parking at the rear, but each of the dwellings also have their own individual parking space, and there's more parking to the front of the flat block. So one of the main issues is we have to consider the fact it's a loss of a community site. So whilst there's not been a community building on site for a long period of time, The policy, CM02, looks at the retention of community facilities, and it considers land last previously used as a community facility. So even though there's nothing on the site at the moment, we have to consider that the last previous use was as a community facility. So this has been submitted in trying to justify it. There's not been any marketing of the site as a community facility, but obviously prior to the council purchasing the site had planning permission for housing with a micro pub as a replacement of the community facility. That scheme has not come forward and is now no longer an extant consent, and therefore as part of this submission instead justification for the fact there's no longer a need for this facility has been put forward. So this plan within the submission looks at the closest public houses to the site, the closest one probably being the Hungry Horse, which is 13 minutes walk, it's shown on this plan, and then also there's quite a few public houses within North Down Road as well, which is also walking distance of the site. So it is accepted there are other facilities that would serve this catchment. Also, prior to the application being submitted, a public consultation was carried out. Nothing has been mentioned by residents about the loss of the community facility, and no one's mentioned through this application the concern about the loss of community facility either. The site is allocated for housing. There's no reference in the allocation policy for the retention of the community facility. So it's considered that given the fact there hasn't been that facility there for a while, and there are other facilities in walking distance of the site, and the fact there doesn't seem to be a concern by residents that actually the loss of that facility is potentially justified if the benefits of the scheme are considered to outweigh that. So again, just looking then at the elevations, so there's Block A, which is the semi-detached here, Block B here, and Block C here. So these are Block A, the two semi-detached properties fronting Arlington Gardens, with a double bay projection, just 2-storey to eaves level with, again, solar panels at roof level, and then the rear elevation of these and the sides, and then just the ground floor layouts and first floor level, so the 3-bed units. And then for the Block C, which is fronting Dane Valley Road, again, similar design units. You can see there, that's a rear elevation and the size. So you can see these are staggered, so similar to those blocks next door that I showed you. These are also staggered, following that pattern of development. And that's the first floor of that one. And then in terms of the flat block, this is the flat block. So it is a much larger dominant building, but we have previously approved 3-storey on the site on the basis that it was quite a large building that was there originally. It's on the lowest ground level. It's a corner, and it feels like something quite dominant could work on the corner. And quite nearby, we've got lots of 3-storey flat blocks that are affordable units owned by the council that are in close proximity. So it's not completely out of character of the area to have buildings of this scale. So this is the elevation fronting onto Arlington Gardens. And then this is the elevation fronting onto Dane Valley Road. So it does go slightly higher here with an actual 4th-storey element. But this bit's set back a little bit further. These are all staggered elements. So in terms of the bulk of the building, whilst it is quite large, it's really broken up by these 3 different elements that you can see that are gabled from the side and are staggered from that elevation as well. And then this is the internal elevation facing in towards the access road. So again, there is slightly higher, but the eaves level is a bit lower, and the windows are actually set within the roof space. Quite large windows, floor-to-ceiling windows, which help to break it up. And again, similar to the design you saw before, these are all recessed windows, and there's lots of brick detailing within the elevation as well. And you can see there's 2 different types of brick as well, which also help to break it up. And then that's the elevation facing the north. So just floor plan. So internally there's a refuse store in that far top corner with a cycle storage. So that was originally facing the side alleyway, but the waste and recycling team said they would prefer to see it at the rear so that they can reverse vehicles in and collect from the back, so that's now been addressed there. And then this is just the first floor. So you can see there's four flats per floor, and then the second floor, and then the ones at the rear in that 4th floor or 3rd floor element. This is the street elevations, so you can see the top one is showing Arlington Gardens, you can see the existing 2-storey dwellings, and then the proposed dwellings, and then this flat block, and then the bottom one is onto Dane Valley Road. So again, the units closest to the neighbours are similar in scale and design, and then it's just this one on the corner that's slightly larger. And then these are the visuals showing how this could look. So again, you can see here the recess, the red brick, grey windows, and then on this bit element here, this central section set back, so again help create some sort of staggering in that front elevation. And then that's a view from Dane Valley Road. So again, landscaping's been introduced, which hasn't previously been on the site. So there's going to be some tree planting along the front, hedgerows, and then the access point is in this point here. That's just showing the brick and material details. So in terms of impact on neighbours, there's not really any huge impact on neighbours. The closest property here in Block C does just fall outside the 45-degree line, so it doesn't impact on number 182. 182 raised concerns with the boundary treatment along here. That's looking to be removed as a brick wall and then rebuilt up to 2 metres. So that should prevent any impact on that neighbour from a new wall being along there. These properties just follow the building lines of the other properties. So the only real concern was whether it was overlooking from any of the units. There's 21 metres from the flat block to the nearest property here. There could be some overlooking to the actual proposed units themselves from the windows in the flat block. So all of the lower half of the windows have been obscure glazed to make sure there's a limited overlooking. But otherwise there's not considered to be any real impact. Highways have raised no concerns with it. There's one parking space per unit plus an additional 1 parking space. The road has visibility displays and electric vehicle charging is being provided. In terms of doorstep play space, each of the properties have gardens. It's quite tight in trying to get space for the doorstep play space, but this area here to the side of the flats is being provided as doorstep play space. So the only other issue is financial contributions. So obviously 100% affordable housing is being achieved on the site, but contributions, because of it being a major application, have been requested by KCC for other things, other infrastructure. We've been able to secure all of the contributions other than the secondary school contribution. The development's quite tight in terms of funding. It's a not-for-profit scheme because of the fact it's a council scheme where we're looking to achieve this 100% affordable housing. So to provide the secondary education contribution would cause concerns with the funding and would delay the time in which the council break even with the development, and we end up with money coming back into the housing allocation funds for future housing development. There's a point of 30 years that if it goes beyond that, it becomes too risky for the council to proceed with and it's no longer viable. If we proceed with the secondary school contribution, it would take it close to that point. And obviously what we want to see is something come forward on this site. I think residents are keen to see the site enhanced, and obviously we're keen to see the full 100% affordable housing on the site as well. So on balance, it was considered that it's reasonable not to secure the secondary contribution on the basis that there are other benefits of the scheme that would outweigh that particular harm. So it is recommended to be deferred for approval, again subject to us securing the financial contributions within our Section 106 account. I don't know what it's called in the planning department. So thank you.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
Thank you. Anyone wish to speak? Councillor Boyd?
This was my first site visit a few days after I had been elected as a ward councillor for Dane Valley, and I was terrified that it was just going to be too big and not enough space. But when I was shown around the site and the drawings, and it's like, wow, they really have thought of everything. So carbon neutral, wow. There is drying space, there's heat pumps, there's solar panels. It just is an incredible regeneration of Dane Valley. Dane Valley doesn't have a lot of money spent on it, and this is, for me, is just a win-win.
Thank you. Anyone else? In which case, we will now put the motion for the officer's recommendation for deferral and delegate to the vote. All in favour? That's carried. Thank you. Which then brings me to say that this concludes the business for this meeting. Thank you for your attendance. Good night. Season's greetings. See you next year. Good night.
Merry Christmas. Yeah, Merry Christmas.
And we didn't quite make the 10:30 need to do an extension.